Chapter 1371. What deeper meaning? Xianji's tone was solemn, and she didn't seem to be lying. It didn't matter if the God Emperor trusted her or not. So long as Heavenly God City was under her control, she absolutely couldn't allow anything to happen to it. She truly felt that the guards hadn't performed well. If they let the important figures of the God race pass unconditionally when they saw them, what would happen if one day a demon or a monster disguised as a high-ranking member of the God race entered Heavenly God City and swaggered on the streets without being suspected? This investigation is to find out who they are, isn't it? Asked Pu Jingwan suddenly. That's right, said Xianji. But I can still sense a lot of demons in this city. If you were worried about demons entering the city, why would you let so many demons in? If you weren't worried about them entering, then what's the point of your investigation? Asked Pu Jingwan. This was a contradiction. Anyone who entered the city or used a transportation formation to enter had to undergo an identity check. The purpose of the check was to find out if they were Yao or demons. But even if they were found out, the demon race and Yao race could still walk around the city as they pleased. If Yao and demons disguised themselves as gods, they wouldn't be found. In the end, they'd enter the city. If they were found, they'd still enter the city. Without disguises, they'd still enter the city. In any case, they'd still enter the city. What was the point of this investigation? It was pointless. In response to Pu Jingwan's doubts, Xianji smiled and explained. The city is naturally for Yao and demons to enter. We're currently in the middle of the battle of geniuses, so they can use the excuse of spectating to enter the city. We gods can't refuse. But there's still a huge difference between finding them and not finding them. If we find them, we'll have them gather in the southern part of the city and send people to monitor them day and night. When they go out, we'll also have God race experts monitor them one-on-one. That way, everything about them will be exposed to us. But if they disguise themselves as gods and enter the city, we'll treat them as if they're gods and won't imprison them. If they suddenly attack, we won't be able to react in time. Yi Zichen couldn't help but nod. Don't be fooled by what Xianji had just said. It sounded like a waste of manpower. The investigation procedures were complicated and required vast amounts of manpower and resources. That was especially true for one-on-one investigations. However, doing so would ensure that nothing would go wrong. At this time, the gates of the divine race were wide open. What they needed to do at this time was to ensure absolute safety. They could not afford any accidents. As for the manpower and resources consumed, it was all worth it as long as they could get through the battle of geniuses. In truth, Xianji hadn't completely revealed everything yet. Her strategy, just now, was only for Sky Supremes and Earth Supremes. As long as they reached the celestial being level, they would have other ways to manage them. However, this was a matter of city defense, so there was no need for her to explain things so clearly to Yi Zichen. She smiled at Yi Zichen and Pu Jingwan, then pursed her lips and arched her brows. What do you two want? Do you want to go back with me and rest? Or do you want to go to the Divine Martial School? With that, she turned to Yi Zichen. I feel like it's better for you to go to my place. It doesn't really matter whether you go to Shenwu or not. Why do you say that? Asked Yi Zichen. Do I still need to explain? The reason for the Battle of Geniuses was just an excuse for the demon race and the monster race to enter and leave the god race's territory at will. They've already achieved their goal. Now, all they have to do is plant the seeds of war within the god race. You can't really be so stupid as to think this is a competition to rank the geniuses of the three realms, right? I don't think you're that brainless. Xianji pursed her lips and shrugged. This was something the upper echelons of the god, Yao, and demon realms, as well as the participants of the Battle of Geniuses, all knew. The Battle of Geniuses was nothing more than a show. Everyone had a tacit understanding of its true purpose. Pu Jingwan was from the outside, so she didn't understand any of this. All she knew was that she was here on a protection mission, and that her employer, Han Nan, had asked her to protect Yi Zichen. It didn't matter where she lived. Yi Zichen was the one who made the decision. She tilted her head and saw Yi Zichen pursing his lips in thought. I'd better go straight to Shenwu. Even though Xianji had been so blunt, Yi Zichen still made up his mind. He naturally knew the purpose of the Battle of Geniuses, but that was precisely why he had to go. There was no way the demons and Yao hadn't anticipated that the god race would keep an eye on them during the Battle of Geniuses. Most of the people who came later wouldn't be able to pull any tricks. In that case, who would be the easiest target? The participants of the Battle of Geniuses, of course. Up to you. In the face of Yi Zichen's refusal, Xianji didn't insist. She let him make his choice. Andy. At that moment, Yi Zichen suddenly spoke up. Xianji looked in his direction and saw that his brows were furrowed deeply as he spoke. Why did Zhou Wu want to become sworn brothers with me? Is there some deeper meaning to this? Well, on the way back, Xianji had thought about it. God Emperor Zhou Wu's declaration of brotherhood was too sudden, but before long, he said it was just a joke. Even with Xianji's exquisite heart, she couldn't guess what he was thinking. In the end, she simply said, "How should I know?" "You're asking me, but who am I supposed to ask? Aren't you good at divination? Do you think I don't need money?" Xianji rolled her eyes at Yi Zichen. She didn't quite know what to say. Zhou Wu is the God Emperor, after all. Do you think he's an ordinary commoner? Right? Your forging of Soul Pearly Yuan is almost complete. Once it's done, I'll send you a message. Bye. With that, Xianji, who had been standing on the street, disappeared. Your Annie left, said Pu Jingwan when she saw that Yi Zichen still hadn't moved. I know, said Yi Zichen without even looking up. He was still thinking about the God Emperor's offer to become sworn brothers with him. Why exactly? Why would the God Emperor say something like that for no apparent reason, then say it was just a joke? Yi Zichen couldn't figure out why the God Emperor would say something like that, or what his intentions were. This made him feel terrible. Yi Zichen wasn't the type of person who liked too many unknowns, especially when it came to becoming sworn brothers with the God Emperor. He felt even more uneasy. At that moment, Pu Jingwan interrupted Yi Zichen's train of thought and blurted out a question. Is there going to be a war? Probably. Yi Zichen was still mulling over the God Emperor's intentions, so he didn't think too much about it. That's great. To his surprise, Pu Jingwan clapped her hands excitedly. A moment later, Yi Zichen saw a pair of fair hands. Chapter 1372. Monster, it was hard to believe that there was such a rule in the Outer Realms bodyguard regulations. If you participate in a large-scale war, you will receive an additional commission based on the scale of the war. Yi Zichen clenched the Bounty Association's manual Pu Jingwan had given him. When he saw what she'd pointed out, his face filled with astonishment. What the hell is this thing for? Wasn't the job of a bodyguard to protect the safety of the employer? Since it was to protect the employer, they would definitely be involved in a fight. Otherwise, why would they hire bodyguards? Too much money to burn. Suddenly coming up with something like this, wasn't this acting shamelessly? Don't look at me like that. Our Bounty Association is very fair. If it's a small fight, we don't need to pay more. It clearly states that it's a war. A war and a small-scale fight are two different things. I'm afraid you're going to get involved in a large-scale war. The death rate in a large-scale war is very high. Bounty agents are all rare talents. Their lives are expensive, so it's necessary to increase their pay. When she saw Yi Zichen's expression, Pu Jingwan puffed out her chest and puffed up her chest. It also says that during the mission, the hired must be absolutely respectful to the employer and must not. Yi Zichen flipped to the front of the code of conduct and prepared to read the first line. Unexpectedly, Pu Jingwan snatched the booklet back and wrinkled her nose. Once you reach the level of a bounty master, you can ignore the previous clauses. There's something like that? Yi Zichen was shocked. Of course I do. Anyway, hurry up and give me more money. If you don't, I have the right to back out of the mission, and I won't give you back the money, said Pu Jingwan, looking up at him. In the past, Yi Zichen wouldn't have hesitated to let her go. But after witnessing God Emperor Zhou Wu's astonishing might, he was determined to keep someone as powerful as Pu Jingwan here, no matter what. No problem. I'll get Han, Nan, to pay you double after the mission. I want it now. Then you are making things difficult for me. Yi Zichen rolled his eyes, then prepared to head towards the Divine Martial Academy. Pu Jingwan didn't give up, and just as they passed by a tavern, Brother Yi, Jiang Yong recognized Yi Zichen at a glance and laughed heartily as he walked out of the tavern to greet him. Yi Zichen stopped in his tracks. When he saw that it was Jiang Yong, he smiled and walked up to him. "Why are you here?" "Drinking with the brothers in the group. Brother Yi I was just about to go to the Divine Martial Academy to see Shui Mo and the others." Little did they know. When Yi Zichen mentioned Shui Mo, Jiang Yong's eyes flashed for a moment. After an instant, he put his hand on Yi Zichen's shoulder and laughed. "There's no hurry. Let's go in and have a drink." Before Yi Zichen could say anything, Jiang Yong dragged him inside. As soon as he entered the tavern, he saw that almost everyone on the first floor was from Skyspan Academy. The Aspiration Society, the Appearance Association, and the Navigators. Yi Zichen even saw the Grizzly Bears, but he didn't see Anti-Upheaval or Jiang Wei. With Jiang Wei's proud and aloof personality, it wasn't strange that he didn't attend such occasions. But Anti-Upheaval's group, to say nothing of the others, Li Hu was definitely there. "Hey, look who's here." Jiang Yong stood at the door and shouted at the top of his lungs. All the students in the tavern looked over, and when they saw Yi Zichen, they all called him Platoon Leader Yi. Jiang Yong's table mates, Murong Shui, the Su brothers, Pang Zheng, and Di Long all walked up to greet him. "Brother Yi, Brother Zichen." Murong Shui and the Su brothers were on good terms with Yi Zichen to begin with, so they greeted him with smiles. Pang Zheng and Di Long, on the other hand, were visibly distressed. Their relationship with Yi Zichen had always been tense, but after learning of his shocking background, they both set aside their enmity towards him. They couldn't be enemies. Given Yi Zichen's background, they'd have to be out of their minds to be enemies with him. "Brother Yi." Pang Zheng's gaze flickered back and forth as he grit his teeth and lifted a cup of wine. "It was my fault for opposing you at every turn. I hope you can let bygones be bygones." He raised his head and downed the wine in his cup. Di Long, who was beside him, also raised his cup and downed the wine. Yi Zichen frowned at them, then picked up a gourd of wine and drained it in one gulp. When they saw this, Pang Zheng and Di Long's frowns relaxed. The Su brothers laughed heartily. All right. We're all from the same academy, so it's inevitable that there'll be conflicts between societies. Let's drink this wine and let bygones be bygones. From now on, let's help each other out and hang out more often." Jiang Yong gave him a thumbs up and laughed. "I knew Brother Yi wasn't the stingy sort. Drink up. How refreshing. All right. Don't just stand there. Sit down. Waiter, bring us 2 more sets of chopsticks." Yi Zichen was pressed onto the chair forcefully as well. Jiang Yong personally brought out a chair and had Pu Jingwan sit down. Yi Zichen sat down, his brows still furrowed. Pang Zheng and Di Long had most likely given in because Xianji had told them about his background. He could understand that. He had no desire to oppose them. Furthermore, since Murong Shui and the others were sitting at the same table, it was clear they'd let bygones be bygones. If he didn't let them go, there'd be no point. So he drank the wine. But what he cared about was why, of all the participants in the Battle of Geniuses, no one from Anti-Upheaval was here. "Brother Yi, drink up." Jiang Yong raised his glass and leaned over. Yi Zichen clinked glasses with him and drained it in one gulp. Then he furrowed his brows and said, "What's going on? You've all come out, but why don't I see anyone from Anti-Upheaval? Why aren't they here?" The other student societies in the tavern froze, and the others at the table paused as well. Murong Shui giggled and explained, "What's going on? Anti-Upheaval just finished a competition. You're all exhausted, so you're resting." "Is that so?" Yi Zichen nodded. Murong Shui poured herself a glass as well. "Brother Zichen, let's have a drink as well." All right. Everyone at the table acted as if they wanted to get him drunk. They toasted him over and over again. It wasn't just his table. The others did the same. They took turns toasting him. Yi Zichen didn't refuse. He drank one glass after another, but he was a bit hesitant. He could understand them toasting him. After all, Xianji had suddenly exposed his background. He deserved a toast, but there was no end to the toasts. Even Murong Shui toasted him 10 times. This was strange. Furthermore, he wasn't satisfied with Murong Shui's explanation of Anti-Upheaval. Tired. If it were anyone else, he might have believed them, but Li Hu, he was more energetic than anyone else. Besides, he'd come out to drink. Even if he died of exhaustion, he'd crawl over. Yi Zichen couldn't understand what they were doing. Chapter 1373. The great sage had gone mad. There was definitely something fishy going on. He knew Li Hu's personality all too well. How could he not come to a drinking event like this? Then there were the people from the other student societies in the tavern. Everyone who'd signed up for the Battle of Geniuses was here. If they kept drinking like this, wouldn't they need to participate? Furthermore, Yi Zichen had the vague feeling that Murong Shui and the others were trying to make him stay. "Brother Yi, let's drink." Pang Zheng raised his cup, then drained it in one gulp before Yi Zichen could say anything. He tipped his cup over and gestured for Yi Zichen to drink as well. Murong Shui was also pouring wine for him, pushing him to have a drink as well. This was too strange. He naturally drank, but he sent Shui Mo a message from under the table. From the moment Yi Zichen stepped into the tavern, he became the absolute center of attention. There was an endless stream of people toasting him, and glass after glass was refilled. Yi Zichen calmly placed his hand on the table. Pu Jingwan, who was sitting beside him, tugged at his hand. Flirting? Of course not. He was using this method to get Pu Jingwan to help him dispel his drunkenness. The people in the tavern weren't just offering him ordinary alcohol. It was called immortal intoxication. Even experts at the celestial being realm would feel tipsy after drinking a certain amount of alcohol. As soon as the alcohol entered his stomach, he used his divine power to dispel it, but there were too many people toasting him. He had no choice but to ask Pu Jingwan for help. It feels like you're not that popular. Everyone's trying to get you drunk. Pu Jingwan's divine sense transmission rang out in his sea of consciousness. Yi Zichen didn't respond. He just continued drinking. You can't do this. Their goal is to get you drunk at all costs. You have to give them some face, right? Besides, so many people are toasting you. If you stay sober, they'll get suspicious. Yi Zichen's hand stiffened. He glanced at Pu Jingwan, then at the other students in the tavern. They were all fighting over each other, but their faces were still flushed with drunkenness. However, Yi Zichen, who'd been toasted in turn, remained clear-headed. This was indeed too suspicious. She was right. Yi Zichen let go of Murong Shui, raised his glass, and downed it. Jiang Yong didn't even give him a chance to catch his breath as he wobbled over with a cup of wine in hand. "Brother Yi, you have a good alcohol tolerance. Let's have another cup. You guys can let me go, please. Even a celestial being would get drunk. If I keep drinking like this, I'm going to pass out." Yi Zichen smiled and pushed down Jiang Yong's glass. "That's about enough. Let's drink some more later. I really can't hold my liquor, so I'm going back." "Don't." Without giving Yi Zichen a chance to speak, Jiang Yong put his arm around his shoulders and laughed. "Let's not go home until we're drunk. Besides, if you go back now, you'll disturb their news, and your female companion won't have a place to stay. Let's drink here. Even if you're really drunk, we can arrange for you to stay here. I'll go back after I sober up. There won't be any delays." The other people at the table also chimed in. Yi Zichen frowned slightly. But the phone in his pocket suddenly vibrated. Yi Zichen had been waiting for Shui Mo's message this entire time, but instead of a jade slip, his phone rang. He took his phone out of his pocket. When Jiang Yong and the others saw that Yi Zichen had business to attend to, they retreated to their seats. However, if he put down his phone, his drink would be delivered to him. He opened his social media app and saw that Yang Jian's message was at the top. "Brother, we're requesting backup." There were 3 exclamation marks. From this, it was clear just how urgent Yang Jian's message had been. He'd most likely gone to the Yao realm with the great sage to seek out Fairy Zixia. For him to send such an urgent message now, Yi Zichen's heart trembled. What is it? As soon as he sent the message, Yang Jian's chat window showed that he was typing something. The monkey's gone crazy. Yang Jian looked behind him and typed out another message. Once again, he ended with an exclamation mark. Before Yi Zichen could reply, a 10-second video appeared. Yi Zichen clicked on it. Boom, boom, boom. A deafening explosion resounded through the air. All the students in the tavern instinctively looked in Yi Zichen's direction. Pu Jingwan waved a finger, and a barrier appeared between the two of them. In the video, countless rocks fell from the sky. The great sage stood in the sky, his expression savage. His Rui Jingu Bang was hundreds of meters long, and its afterimages swept across the mountain range like a broom. Rocks flew everywhere. Within a radius of 1,000 miles, there were crushed rocks and ancient trees that had been snapped in half. The entire video was a mess. At the end of the video, Yi Zichen even heard Yang Jian mutter, "He's gone crazy. He's gone crazy." The video was only 10 seconds long, but it was enough to show that the great sage's emotions were truly unstable. Below the video was a message from Yang Jian. "See? It looks like the monkey's gone berserk. He's been venting for almost an hour now. Hurry up and get over here. Bring Pu Jingwan over too. I can't control him right now." "You can't control him?" Yi Zichen was stunned. After all, Yang Jian could instantly kill even a demon god. Back in the heavenly court, the great sage truly was the victorious fighting Buddha. Suppressing Yang Jian was no problem at all. But this was the upper realm of the gods, Yao, and demon realms. The great sage had only just become a diviner. How could Yang Jian not be able to handle him? Now's not the time to explain. Hurry up and get over here. If you're any later, you'll have to come collect my corpse. Coordinates. A map suddenly appeared on the screen. At the same time, Yi Zichen replied. "Hold on." When Yang Jian saw the message, he gulped, then put his phone back in his pocket. At that moment, he was stealthily hiding in a crack in a boulder, watching the raging monkey in the sky. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and muttered, "What the hell is going on? What the hell is going on?" Yang Jian's eyes narrowed. In truth, he didn't know what was going on either. He brought the great sage to Zixia, but the monkey had gone in on his own. Yang Jian had simply waited outside for news. An hour later, the monkey emerged. At the time, he behaved normally, but after leaving and coming here, he seemed to have gone mad. His aura skyrocketed, and even Yang Jian found it hard to keep him in check. What's going on? Could it be that he broke up with someone, got rejected, or a bad premonition suddenly popped into Yang Jian's mind? But if that was really the case, then the great sage's madness made sense. Chapter 1374. The truth, Yang Jian wasn't sure if the great sage had been cuckolded or not. Everything was just his conjecture. Furthermore, with his usual conflicts with the great sage, he really didn't think in a good way. Regardless of the reason for his madness, he was actually alone. If he really wanted to suppress the great sage, he would naturally have a chance. However, he would definitely injure the monkey due to his lack of control over his strength. He definitely hated the monkey, but Yang Jian didn't want to hurt him. All he could do now was wait for Yi Zichen and Pu Jingwan to arrive. If he and Pu Jingwan joined forces, their chances of suppressing the great sage would be even higher. At that time, regardless of whether he was cuckolded or because of other reasons, he would slowly console himself. When Yi Zichen found out that Yang Jian's situation was urgent, he put his phone back into his pocket with a solemn expression. "What's wrong? The video I saw just now seemed to be your friend getting angry." "Let's head to the Yao realm right now," said Yi Zichen solemnly. Pu Jingwan nodded. "Then are we just going to ignore them?" Back in the tavern, Murong Shui and the others had been acting very strangely. He didn't understand why Anti-Upheaval's brothers hadn't come. However, Yi Zichen was keenly aware that, given Murong Shui's relationship with Shui Mo, they weren't trying to isolate Anti-Upheaval, target them, or harm them. If they really wanted to do that, they wouldn't have dragged him here to drink. Perhaps he really was just overthinking things. Perhaps these people just wanted to drink with him. Perhaps Anti-Upheaval's brothers really were tired and had gone to rest. It was entirely possible. It wasn't just Pang Zheng and Dilong Murong Shui and Jian Yong were there as well. The two of them would never harm Shui Mo. For some reason, Yi Zichen thought of a possibility. After mulling it over for a while, Yi Zichen decided that the great sage's situation was more urgent. At the very least, the great sage's reaction was more direct. "Whatever," Pu Jingwan said, her face dark. Pu Jingwan removed the restrictions around them. They didn't know why, but when they saw Yi Zichen's solemn expression, their faces darkened as well. Murong Shui asked tentatively as soon as the restriction disappeared. "Brother Zichen, did something happen?" Are you guys hiding something from me? Asked Yi Zichen. How could that be? We're brothers. How could we possibly hide anything from you? Jiang Yong laughed. We just saw that you didn't look too good and wanted to show some concern. You guys are weird. Yi Zichen squinted his eyes, but a faint light still shone through them. Those who were stared at by this gaze subconsciously turned their heads away. Some were minding their own business, and some were staring at the ceiling and floor of the tavern. In short, they looked very uncomfortable. As expected, when he saw their expressions, Yi Zichen smiled calmly. Our anti-upheaval society was eliminated, right? But your society's advanced, so we're here to celebrate. Sorry to invite Shui and Mo and the others. Everyone's expressions changed. Jiang Yong smiled bitterly and nodded. Yes, Brother Yi is indeed an understanding person. As expected, that was a possibility that Yi Zichen suddenly thought of. There naturally had to be a winner in this sort of battle of geniuses. After losing him, anti-upheaval's overall strength was far inferior to the other student societies. In a battle of geniuses like this, there was a high chance they'd be eliminated. Even Li Hu wouldn't be so thick-skinned as to attend a celebratory banquet for the victors. Ah, look at you guys. Did you have to go so far behind my back for something so trivial? You even got me drunk and didn't want me to go back? You're worried that if I find out, I'll hug them and cry. Yi Zichen couldn't help but shake his head and laugh bitterly. Don't take it to heart. Our anti-upheaval really is the weakest of all the student societies, and I wasn't there either. It's all my fault. When you go back, help me comfort Shui Mo and the others. Don't take it too seriously. They were eliminated, but you guys are still here, right? Brother Yi, you're not going back? Asked Pang Zheng. I can't. I have to hurry to the Yao realm. I'm on my way right now. You guys just keep drinking and don't worry about me. When you get back, you have to comfort them for me, especially Morong Shui. You're on good terms with Shui Mo, so help her talk some sense into it. Why get back? I'll make it up to them. With that, he glanced meaningfully at Pu Jingwan, and the two of them vanished from the tavern like a gust of wind. The group leaders in the tavern walked to the door and watched as the two of them left. Then, they sighed and returned to their seats. We're pretty lucky, aren't we? Even if we got him drunk, we'd at most delay him for a few days. He suddenly has to go to the Yao realm, and it'll take him at least half a month to go back and forth, said Di Long, rubbing his wine glass. That's right. Pang Zheng nodded. At least we don't have to waste any more time in this tavern, sighed Su Lei. Had they really come here to celebrate? Of course not. In truth, Yi Zichen didn't know that they'd set up camp in the tavern 3 days ago. They'd stayed here from morning to night because this was the only way to the Divine Martial School, and they'd set up camp here, all for the sake of stopping Yi Zichen and preventing him from entering the Divine Martial School. Is this really all right? Su Chao had drunk quite a bit of a mortal intoxication, and his face was flushed. His eyes brimmed with confusion. Even if we stop him like this, how long can we possibly hold him off? Brother, you will find out sooner or later. Every minute counts. Every second counts. Given his relationship with Shui Mo, what do you think he'll do if he finds out? Jiang Yong slapped the table and shouted. What's the point of dragging things out like this? He'll find out sooner or later. You don't need to yell at me. I'm just telling you rationally that there's no point in dragging things out. What are you yelling for? Roared Su Chao. What are you two doing? Pang Zheng stepped between them. Don't get too worked up. Right now, all we need to do is wait for Shui Mo to wake up. So long as she wakes up, Brother Yi will find out. I think Jiang Yong's right. Every minute we delay gives Shui and Mo more time to wake up. Let's stall for as long as we can. It's all my fault. Suddenly, Murong Shui threw her arms around her shoulders and burst into tears. If I'd held on a little longer and met up with Shui Mo, we could have worked together and she wouldn't have ended up like that. Or if I'd been there and sensed danger, I would have told her to forfeit instead of fighting the entire match. It's all my fault, all my fault. Everyone in the tavern fell silent. Jiang Yong pulled her into his arms and comforted her. How is this your fault? If we were strong enough, we wouldn't have just watched Shui and Mo suffer like that, and we wouldn't have let that guy leave so arrogantly. Chapter 1375. Yang Jian acts pitiful because of the battle of geniuses. The Yao and demons had come to Heavenly God City to watch. They deliberately built a two-way space transfer array at the Heavenly God Realm that could lead straight to the end. The God Race also turned a blind eye to this. After an hour, Yi Zichen and Pu Jingwan arrived in the Yao region. Even though they were in the Yao region, there was still a network signal. It seemed that Zhuangmo's network had already extended all the way to Yao territory. What's the situation? Yi Zichen, who was rushing over to Yang Jian's side through a spiritual formation, sent him a message. Not long later, he received a reply. It's not good, but it's not bad either. He's still in a frenzied state, but I'm not injured. Not long after the message was sent, Yang Jian sent another message asking, "Where are you? We'll be there soon. Hide well." Yang Jian didn't even need to say anything. Yi Zichen already knew that he was hiding somewhere, paying close attention. They were far too familiar with each other. He'd long since figured out each other's personalities. When he saw Yi Zichen's message, Yang Jian's face reddened. However, he didn't say anything. He simply put his phone in his pocket, stuck his head through a crack in the rock, and looked around. The moonlight was hazy. It was a full moon, and its pure moonlight bathed the land, covering the Yao region in a long silver robe. Yi Zichen and Pu Jingwan finally arrived an hour after asking about Yang Jian's situation. What they'd seen in the video was just the tip of the iceberg. When they finally arrived, "That's a bit too vicious, isn't it?" Pu Jingwan crossed her arms and stared at the ruined ancient forest in astonishment. It had been thousands of miles long, but now it was completely ravaged. There were no signs of Yao or wild animals alive. There wasn't even a single bird to be seen. In the distance, deafening roars could be heard from time to time, and violent divine power ripples could be heard. At that moment, a streak of light streaked through the sky and landed in front of them. "Bro, you're finally here." A sobbing voice came out of Yang Jian's mouth, but when he was crying, he vaguely felt that there was a leak in his voice. Yi Zichen was shocked. At that moment, he wasn't hiding properly like he said in the phone. His eyes were bruised, and he had lost 2 teeth. The teeth around his mouth were also a little loose, as if they were going to fall off at any time. "You, brother." Yang Jian reached out and hugged Yi Zichen, then sobbed uncontrollably. Pu Jingwan was already covering her mouth and giggling. Yi Zichen's lips quivered, but he couldn't speak for a long time. Finally, Pu Jingwan reached out and patted his back a few times. After a while, the crying Yang Jian finally calmed down a little. At the same time, Yi Zichen also looked at him, who had panda eyes. "How did you become like this? Didn't I tell you to hide properly?" He had clearly instructed him to hide and wait for him to come over. In less than an hour, he had been beaten up so badly. In fact, Yang Jian's crying just now was also an act. He did not manage to squeeze out a single tear for a long time. When he was asked why things had turned out this way, his face instantly darkened. "It's all because of that damned monkey." Yang Jian cursed viciously, then glared at Yi Zichen. "Brother, tell me, do I owe that damned monkey anything?" I knew he'd been thinking about Zixia, so I helped him find a residence and brought him here myself. But not only did he not know how to be grateful, he even King beat me up. Look at what he did to me. Look at it now. Yang Jian pointed at his panda eyes and the bruises on his arms. "He's so heartless. A dog ate his conscience." Woof woof. The howling celestial dog barked, as if rebuking Yi Zichen for calling it a dog. "Scram. Just looking at you makes me angry. I was beaten so badly, and all you did was hide in the corner. You didn't even dare let out a fart." Yang Jian kicked the howling celestial dog again. The howling celestial dog whimpered and wagged its tail, but it lay to the side and stopped barking. "Why are you venting your anger on the howling celestial dog?" Yi Zichen whistled at the howling celestial dog, telling it to lie down. "Did the great sage beat you up and down?" "That's him." Yang Jian glared at him. "No way." Yi Zichen was shocked. He knew how strong Yang Jian was, and he also knew how strong the great sage was. Even if the great sage went berserk, there was no way he could beat the ruler-level Yang Jian into this state. Furthermore, judging from his silence, it didn't seem like he'd gained the upper hand. How could you not beat the great sage? I fell for his tricks. Yang Jian tried his best to explain. Don't underestimate that monkey. I sensed a particularly fierce power in his body earlier, but now that he's gone berserk, it's fair to say he's unleashed all of that power. You're saying the great sage is now a ruler? When he saw Yang Jian nod silently, Yi Zichen's shock reached its peak. What on earth was going on? When the great sage left, he'd only just become a diviner. It had only been a few days, but he'd already become a ruler? What's more, Yang Jian couldn't do anything to him. This was a bit too inconceivable. If others found out, especially those experts who'd gone to great lengths to become rulers, or those who'd been stuck at the diviner level for 1,000 years, what would they think? He'd become a ruler just because he'd gone berserk? When had rulers become so cheap? Then why did the great sage hit you? Yi Zichen couldn't quite figure it out, but then he realized the great sage was in a state of madness, so he changed the subject. You said in your message that you couldn't keep the great sage under control, so why did you go to him anyway? Yang Jian coughed awkwardly. Did you really think you wanted to go to the great sage's place? In truth, he'd been hiding in a crack in the rock. Just as he was shaking his head, the great sage had smashed a rock into his head. He was instantly enraged. He had to teach that damned monkey a lesson. In the end, he'd seen it for himself. He'd been beaten, and not lightly either. But given his personality, could he tell the truth? He definitely couldn't. Why did I go to him anyway? Wasn't it all for his sake? Yang Jian feigned righteousness and cursed. In the middle of his madness, he seemed to be hurting himself. In order to protect him, I don't want to talk about it anymore. Talking about it really pisses me off. Yang Jian was furious. Even Yi Zichen was stunned by his deep sense of righteousness. Was this really the Yang Jian he knew? But when he thought about the great sage and Yang Jian's love-hate relationship, it made sense. It's been hard on you. Has the great sage calmed down yet? Chapter 1376. Pu Jingwan. Full of righteousness, Yang Jian's eyes were fixed on Yi Zichen's. His previously dry eyes were now brimming with tears. He'd been beaten and beaten to such a sorry state. Even now, all Yi Zichen cared about was the damned monkey's condition. What the hell? He'd acted pitiful for no reason at all. Why are you looking at me like that? Yi Zichen felt a little uncomfortable under Yang Jian's gaze. How is the great sage doing? Tell me. Bro, you my bro, right? Yang Jian grabbed him by the shoulder. That's right, said Yi Zichen. Look at my face. My handsome, envious-looking face. Yang Jian spat out the words with great force, then glared at Yi Zichen's bruised eyes. That monkey beat me to this state. Why aren't you worried about me? Why are you still thinking about that monkey? No. Didn't you call us here for the great sage? You're doing this to protect him, right? All right. I know you're worried about the great sage. You've done well. Yi Zichen laughed and praised Yang Jian. That's good enough, right? How old are you? You still need to be coaxed? You're amazing. The great sage must have cultivated 8 lifetimes worth of good fortune to have a bro like you. Now, can you tell me about the great sage's condition? Yang Jian didn't say anything for a long time. After a while, that monkey's still mad. As he spoke, Yang Jian rolled his eyes. It was clear he was in a bad mood. What should we do now? I suggest we use the cruelest methods possible to teach him a lesson, snorted Yang Jian. In the face of this, Yi Zichen suddenly doubted the veracity of Yang Jian's words. He'd clearly said he'd been beaten up by the great sage and wanted to get back at him. If he really was worried about the great sage getting hurt, he wouldn't have said that. Yi Zichen looked Yang Jian up and down. By now, he was already rubbing his palms in anticipation. All he had to do was wait for Pu Jingwan to nod. That was definitely fake. He looked at Pu Jingwan. If they wanted to suppress the great sage in his current state, she was the only one who could do it. This was the result of their discussion. Unexpectedly, Pu Jingwan retracted her smile. What are you looking at me for? You want me to become like him? Don't even think about it. She had changed her mind. What do you mean by that? Didn't we agree before we came? Said Yi Zichen. We had a deal before, but now I'm regretting it, said Pu Jingwan. Don't speak. Pu Jingwan reached out and covered Yi Zichen's mouth. I said I'm not going, so I'm definitely not going. Then you want me to go? Yi Zichen frowned. If you don't want to go, just let him vent. When he's done, he'll naturally stop. Anyway, don't let me go. Don't even think about it. We haven't even talked about the pay increase yet. And now you're ordering me around? Said Pu Jingwan. Can you not be so vulgar? Is this the time to talk about money? I'm your employer, but all I have to do is keep you safe. I'm not your puppet. I have to do whatever you want me to do. If you want me to help you carry on the family line, do I have to take off my clothes and lie on the bed waiting for you to come? Pu Jingwan's domineering words left Yi Zichen speechless. Yi Zichen, of course, had no such intentions. All he wanted was for Pu Jingwan and Yang Jian to work together and calm the great sage down. But for what she just said, it seemed that was no longer possible. Don't worry too much. Didn't Yang Jian already tell you? After your friend went berserk, his cultivation rose steadily, right? Said Pu Jingwan. Yang Jian nodded in response. Pu Jingwan shrugged. You're right. That's exactly it. When I saw him, I sensed the power inside him. Someone must have intentionally left it inside him, and going berserk might be a way for him to vent it. Right now, he's going berserk because he's digesting the remaining power inside him. Once he's done, he'll naturally calm down. Are you saying you don't want to go? Yi Zichen pursed his lips. Of course not. What I've said is a reasonable analysis. Besides, if I don't want to go, do you think you can force me to go? Her merciless attack left Yi Zichen speechless. Hanan said he'd find him a bodyguard, but she'd obviously just found him an ancestor. He couldn't afford to offend her, couldn't talk to her, and yet she kept asking for more money. Then should we just wait? This time, Yi Zichen decided he might as well ask for her opinion. Pu Jingwan nodded matter-of-factly. They definitely couldn't order this ancestor around. Yi Zichen and Yang Jian glanced at each other, then gave up. Since they couldn't do anything, what was the point of coming here? They might as well let Yang Jian hide and wait until the great sage's berserk ended. That way, they could stay in Heavenly God City and confirm anti-upheaval situation. At the time, he'd assumed that anti-upheaval had been eliminated and the other student societies had advanced, which was why they hadn't attended the celebration banquet. But in truth, he'd only said it in passing to assuage his suspicions. He'd come looking for Yang Jian and the others without any misgivings. At the very least, he needed to see anti-upheaval's members before he could truly relax. Furthermore, he'd sent Shui Mo a message, but she hadn't responded yet. This made him a bit worried. Since he was already here, he might as well take things as they came. Since he was already here, worrying about it was pointless. Yi Zichen could only set aside his worries about anti-upheaval. Even if something really had happened to the student society, he'd have to wait until he got back. He sighed helplessly. When Pu Jingwan heard his sigh, she wrinkled her nose proudly. Now that he saw her, Yi Zichen was infuriated. He looked away from Pu Jingwan, who was winking at him, and said to Yang Jian, "Why did the great sage suddenly go berserk? Great sage, why did you suddenly go crazy? Didn't you come to see Zixia Fairy? Did you not see her?" "I think so." Yang Jian hesitated for a moment, then explained what had happened between him and the great sage. He went in on his own. I don't know what happened, but when he came out, he was already like this. Could it be that he was rejected? Yi Zichen furrowed his brows. The way he saw it, it was possible. Fairy Zixia and the great sage had been separated for tens of thousands of years. Too many unknowns could arise in such a long time. Perhaps in the past 10,000 years, their feelings for each other had faded. Even though the great sage still loved Zixia, he was no longer the true love of the past to Zixia. As a result, when the great sage went to see her, he'd been treated like a good guy. This sort of huge psychological difference could easily cause a person to lose control of their emotions. That's why, after the great sage left, he couldn't hold back his anger. He dragged Yang Jian to a desolate, uninhabited place and vented all his pent-up frustrations. That's what Yi Zichen thought, but Yang Jian pursed his lips and shook his head. I don't think it was as simple as being rejected. You know, in response to Yi Zichen's astonished exclamation, Yang Jian grinned, shook his head, and snorted. The way I see it, this monkey was probably cuckolded. Before Yang Jian could finish his sentence, he felt something cold on the left side of his face. He glanced out of the corner of his eye and saw an iron staff pressed against his face, followed by an icy smile. Chapter 1377. Yang Jian was terrified. No one had noticed when the great sage had arrived. By the time they heard his words, he was already standing half a meter away. It was the great sage's Rui Jingu Bang. It slammed into Yang Jian's face and pushed him back a few steps. By now, he didn't seem the least bit as mad as he'd been in the video. His eyes were as clear as water, but his expression was frightening. "You're here too." He cocked his head at Yi Zichen and Pu Jingwan and arched his brows, then swung his staff aside. "Who do you think you're trying to scare? Are you trying to scare me or not? Just tell me if I can beat you up or not. If you don't like the beating just now, I don't mind loosening your bones for free." A flash of golden light shot out of the great sage's eyes, and his sleeves fluttered. The Rui Jingu Bang in his hands buzzed and trembled, as if he were ready to attack at the slightest provocation. When he saw this, Yi Zichen's pupils constricted. He didn't care that the great sage and Yang Jian were about to fight. They'd been at loggerheads ever since they were in the heavenly court, and neither of them had a good opinion of the other. He'd long since grown accustomed to bickering like this. What shocked him was the great sage's aura. His aura was unparalleled, as if he were looking down on all of heaven and earth, and the faint undulations of Yao God power emanating from him. Only rulers could release such oppressive pressure. Yi Zichen glanced at Pu Jingwan, who understood what he was thinking. She nodded. He really is a ruler. Even though Yang Jian had said the great sage was already a ruler, that was just his personal judgment. Yi Zichen hadn't seen it for himself. Now, a ruler-level great sage was standing right in front of him. It was hard to imagine how shocked he was. Yi Zichen didn't know what Yang Jian was thinking, but in the face of the great sage's disdainful words, he didn't retaliate. He licked his lips and scratched his head, but Yi Zichen saw the great sage glancing at him. He was scared. From the look on his face, it was obvious Yang Jian was scared. Otherwise, given his personality, there was no way he'd tolerate the great sage talking to him like that. However, this indirectly proved just how strong the great sage was. If their cultivations were similar, Yang Jian would have fought him without a doubt. It seemed that the difference between the two of them was not just a little. Now that he thought about it, the great sage's cultivation truly was terrifyingly high. Yang Jian was now one of the most powerful figures in the three realms. He was strong enough to kill a demon god. Although his cultivation wasn't higher than Shui Yang's, it was close. To be able to make Yang Jian admit defeat without uttering a single word, the great sage was now the realm of the three emperors. Amidst the silence, Yang Jian couldn't help but glance at Yi Zichen. Perhaps seeing that Zhang Xian did not speak for a long time, she became a little anxious and directly used her divine sense to communicate with him. "What are you waiting for? Say something." Yi Zichen couldn't help but laugh at the urgency and nervousness in his voice. It seemed that Yang Jian really was afraid of the great sage beating him with the Rui Jingu Bang. However, the great sage couldn't blame anyone for treating him this way. Just look at how despicable he was when he was drunk. He didn't even think positively about anything. The moment he went up, he suspected that the great sage might have been cuckolded. Who would be able to tolerate that? "Great sage, if you want to beat him up, then beat him up. I won't stop you." Not only did Yi Zichen refuse to put in a good word for Yang Jian, but he even took a step back, as if he didn't want to get involved. Pu Jingwan did the same and stepped aside. She also felt that Yang Jian's mouth was a little too vicious. He indiscriminately accused someone of being cuckolded. She couldn't stand it any longer. "Hey, you guys. Wah." When Yang Jian saw Pu Jingwan and Yi Zichen ignore him and step aside, he pointed at them. He looked like he was on the verge of collapse. He couldn't speak for a long time. In the end, all he could do was stare at them, mouth agape, as if he'd accidentally made friends. No one spoke up for him, so Yang Jian cracked his neck and threw caution to the wind. "Howling celestial dog." The lance suddenly appeared in his hand, and he called out to the howling celestial dog again. It seemed he was ready to fight. To his surprise, The howling celestial dog whimpered and wagged its tail. It lay by Yizichin's side and didn't move. It didn't so much as glance in his direction. "You stupid dog, who exactly is your master? I went through untold hardships to help you advance, and now you're *king abandoning me?" Yang Jian roared at the howling celestial dog, but the dog just lay there, ignoring him. This time, Yang Jian was in a bit of pickle. The howling celestial dog took up 30% of his strength. In a one-on-one fight, he was absolutely no match for the monkey. Now you can see how popular you are. The great sage curled his lips and put away the Rui Jingu Bang. "Look at how pitiful you look. Forget it, I'll let you off the hook." "What do you mean?" Yang Jian panicked. "Are you looking down on me?" "Yeah, I'm looking down on you. So what?" The great sage sneered, shrank the Rui Jingu Bang into his ear, then walked over to Yizichin. Yang Jian stomped his feet in anger and yelled about fighting the great sage for 300 rounds. But the great sage said he wouldn't fight him, so he wouldn't. No matter how much Yang Jian yelled, the great sage ignored him and even started chatting with Yizichin. "Bro, why are you here too? Didn't you say you had business to attend to? I've pretty much taken care of things on my end. Yang Jian sent me a message saying you were in trouble, so I came over to take a look. It's good to see you're fine." "What did he say?" asked the great sage. "He didn't say much. He just said your emotions weren't too stable and sent me a video call to urge me to come over," said Yizichin. "You have nothing better to do than send a video call." The great sage glared at Yang Jian. "Don't be so heartless. I felt like you were having a mental breakdown and was afraid something would happen to you. That's why I called Zichin over," said Yang Jian, rolling his eyes. "I, Lai's son, have always been very rational. Just now, I only went berserk to stimulate the power master left in my body. There's no need for you to meddle in other people's business. You even called Yi Zichin over," cursed the great sage. "Master," Yi Zichin was stunned. "Venerable Xuanzang," the great sage shook his head. Yi Zichin understood. "That's him. Master Subhoodie." The great sage had two masters. One was Golden Cicada, who'd been exiled to the mortal realm to seek scriptures. His mortal name was Venerable Xuanzang, and after returning, he became the Buddha of sandalwood merit. As for the other master, he was Master Subhoodie. However, after teaching the great sage's ultimate techniques, he left and forbade others from telling them he was his apprentice. "You saw Master Subhoodie again?" The great sage nodded gently. "In truth, I didn't really see him. Do you remember when the demons invaded? Master Subhoodie saved me and only woke up half a year ago. After that, he said a few words to me, then kicked me out again." Chapter 1378. Brains are good, he had too much character. As he listened to the great sage's simple description, Yi Zichin could imagine what had happened. The great sage had definitely awoken and been shocked to see the patriarch, but the patriarch had calmly waved him off, told him to make good use of the power he'd left in his body, then kicked him out of the sect. There was no need to think too much. That was definitely the case. Yi Zichin couldn't help but smile wryly. Patriarch Subhoodie definitely valued the great sage, but his personality, it was hard to say. Yi Zichin looked at the great sage's bitter smile when he said he'd been kicked out and knew that his guess was most likely correct. The great sage clearly didn't understand his master's actions either. Back then, he'd secretly learned for the patriarch after midnight. After learning, he'd kicked him out of the sect, and he couldn't even say he was his disciple. When the great sage was in trouble, the patriarch had immediately stepped in to help, saving him from the brink of death, and even left him with enough power to break through to the ruler level. Then he'd kicked him out, but he couldn't say he was his disciple. "My patriarch, aren't you just giving away your secret? Who doesn't know the great sage is your disciple?" Yi Zichin muttered to himself, but he couldn't deny it. The thoughts of major experts were hard to fathom. But this also proved how powerful Patriarch Subhoodie was. Just the power he'd left in the great sage's body was enough to help him break through to the ruler level. Furthermore, he'd gone from diviner to this level so quickly. If so, then what level was Patriarch Subhoodie at? At the very least, he was stronger than the three emperors. There was always someone stronger than you out there. That wasn't false at all. On the surface, the three emperors might be the strongest in the three realms, but who knew how strong those hidden experts were? They simply didn't want to get involved in worldly affairs, but that didn't mean they were weaker than the three emperors. This isn't going to be easy. Yi Zichen sighed. He was sighing about how to seize celestial fate. Through Xianji, he'd already learned of God Emperor Zhou Wu's enormous faction. The Yao Emperor and Demon Emperor were surely no different. Seizing celestial fate from the three emperors and transcending was already incredibly difficult. Guli was still watching from the shadows, like a tiger watching its prey. There were still so many hidden, peerless experts. When the third era faced its final end, these experts would definitely jump out. Right now, Yi Zichen was like a small boat. The surface of the sea seemed calm, but in reality, it was filled with turbulent undercurrents. If he wasn't careful, he'd be swallowed whole, leaving not even his bones behind. For some reason, even with the outside support, Yi Zichen found it difficult to calm down. Just as Yi Zichen was lost in thought, Yang Jian, who'd been silent all this time, suddenly grew anxious. After the great sage had scolded him, Yang Jian pondered for a while. He went berserk in order to stimulate the power in his body. He had always been very rational. In that case, wasn't the injury on his face intentionally caused by the monkey? If he had beaten him up when he was in a frenzy, he would have admitted it. To do it on purpose, you King hit me on purpose. The great sage glanced at him and said indifferently, I did it on purpose. What about it? But he couldn't beat him. If he really wanted to kill, Yang Jian knew that he wouldn't be much weaker than the great sage. But everyone could see the relationship between them. They loved each other and hated each other. Even if they fought, they were just playing around. If they hurt each other, they'd just curse each other and continue fighting. Neither of them would truly hate the other. If he fought the monkey, he definitely wouldn't kill him. But if they fought as if they were just exchanging pointers, he really couldn't beat the monkey. He glared at the monkey for a long time, then sighed. You really are too disappointing. I was worried you'd go berserk and hurt yourself, so I went out of my way to protect you. You took that King broken stick of yours and hit me 7 or 8 times, beating me into this state. If you hadn't been rational at the time, it would have been one thing, but you said you were very rational. I'm so sad. Really, we've been brothers for so many years for nothing. Let's not talk about it anymore. Monkey, I'm really too disappointed. Yang Jian covered his face, looking like he wanted to break off all ties with the great sage. If anyone else saw this, who knew how moved they'd be? The great sage crossed his arms and turned to look at the heartbroken Yang Jian. Lie, keep lying. Yang Jian was speechless. Why did I hit you? Don't you have any idea? Why didn't you think about it? Why didn't the rocks hit you before, but then a rock suddenly hit your face? The great sage said, that stone was a warning to you. You didn't even think about it properly, and you still want to come up and beat me up. Do you think I'd let you off? Did you hear that? Yang Jian, who was heartbroken, suddenly shouted with his eyes wide open. Huh. The great sage simply laughed coldly, then told him to think about it for himself. Then there's nothing wrong with what I said, retorted Yang Jian. You were fine when you left Zixa's place, but now you're acting up and you're hitting me like crazy. I'm starting to wonder if you've been cuckolded. Bang! Before he could finish speaking, the great sage's stick smashed into his face, burying him deep into the ground. Yi Zichen and Pu Jingwan watched silently, shaking their heads from time to time. This was no longer just a matter of his cheap mouth. The great sage had clearly expressed his dissatisfaction with his explanation, yet Yang Jian still dared bring it up. Was there something wrong with his head? Your friend's head? Pu Jingwan drew circles on his head. Yi Zichen sighed and shook his head. Forget about him. How did he manage to live so long? Asked Pu Jingwan. He's lucky, I guess, sighed Yi Zichen. This time, the great sage didn't put the Rui Jingu bang away. Instead, he thickened it and held it in the air, pressing Yang Jian firmly into the ground, preventing him from escaping. After a long while, when Yang Jian didn't move, Yi Zichen couldn't bear it anymore. How about you let him out? He doesn't want to die. It's better if he's dead. The great sage glanced at him, then spat on the ground. However, his words caused Yi Zichen's tense heart to relax. He probably wouldn't die. Since Yang Jian's life wasn't in danger, Yi Zichen wasn't too worried. For someone with a brain like that, waking him up in the earth wouldn't be a bad thing. Instead of pleading on Yang Jian's behalf, Yi Zichen said, "What about Zixia?" In truth, he'd been avoiding this topic for fear of touching on the great sage's sore spot and losing control of his emotions. But after thinking it over, he decided he had to ask. For better or worse, he was now working with the outside. With his status as the outside special envoy, he might even be able to help the great sage out. Inexplicably, the great sage's face contorted in bitterness. He pursed his lips and forced a smile, but his lips were trembling slightly. Next, he sighed and gazed off into the distance. Chapter 1379. One night beneath the tranquil night sky, the great sage's expression was desolate and bitter, illuminated by the moonlight. It was a heart-wrenching sight. He smiled silently as he gazed off into the distance. His fiery passion seemed to have been extinguished by a shower of ice. Up ahead, Yi Zichen and Pu Jingwan were affected by his emotions. Yi Zichen had watched the movie Journey to the West, and although he didn't know everything, he knew most of the love and hatred between the great sage and Fairy Zixia. He also knew how deep the great sage's love for her was. Pu Jingwan was different. She'd only met the great sage once. Right now, she was completely affected by the great sage's emotions. His emotions had driven her from her previous disdain towards Yang Jian to her current silence. After thousands of years of waiting, the great sage was finally able to stand before Fairy Zixia once more. After meeting again, all he got was "It's all in the past." How cruel! No one said anything else. Even when Yang Jian crawled out from beneath the Rui Jingu Bang, his face covered in dirt, he put his hands on his hips and cursed loudly. However, when they sensed the oppressive atmosphere, they all fell silent. What's going on? Why does the monkey look like that? Yang Jian snuck up to Yi Zichen and Pu Jingwan and asked in confusion. He just crawled out of the ground, and his body still smelled of the earth. He glanced at him, but said nothing. He scratched his head, then his eyes suddenly lit up. Ha ha ha, I didn't guess right, did I? That monkey really was. Shut up. Yi Zichen and Pu Jingwan shouted at the same time, but the great sage was even faster. The Rui Jingu Bang descended from the heavens. With a boom, it kicked up countless rocks and gusts of wind. Yang Jian, who just crawled out of the ground, returned to his old home. Really? How on earth did he manage to live this long? I wanted to beat him up just now. Pu Jingwan clenched her fists in anger. Even at a time like this, he was still making fun of the great sage. He was too heartless. After spending so much time with him, she'd gained some understanding of Yang Jian. His taunting skills had definitely reached the maximum level. It was just that he wasn't smart enough. He didn't know when to mock and when to shut his mouth. This kind of person should be silenced or made a mute so that he wouldn't come out and harm people. In the face of Pu Jingwan's fury, Yi Zichen glanced at her, but said nothing. If one were to say that Yang Jian had gone overboard, he had always been like that. His words were filled with ridicule, but he never considered whether the situation was appropriate or not. This could only be attributed to his personality. Yi Zichen, who'd known him for so long, didn't criticize him. He believed that the great sage was well aware of his personality, which was why he only used the Rui Jingu Bang to suppress him and did not fly into a rage. He knew that Yang Jian's words were unintentional, but it was like a sharp blade that gently scratched his heart. Yi Zichen walked up to the great sage and took out 2 bottles of divine brew. Want some? The great sage grabbed the godly brew, then tilted his head back and poured the entire bottle into his mouth, not leaving a single drop behind. He didn't ask for more, and Yi Zichen didn't give it to him. Yi Zichen drank to help him relax, not to make him drink himself into a drunken stupor. What do you think after that? Yi Zichen took a sip and laughed. The great sage rested his hands on the back of his head and leaned against the ancient tree he'd broken earlier. He looked up at the dazzling starry sky. What else could I think? Just live on. His relaxed tone made Yi Zichen's heart ache. He understood exactly how the great sage was feeling right now. They'd loved each other for so long, yet they'd broken up just like that. Anyone else would be able to do it without the slightest bit of hesitation. The mess in front of him was the best explanation. The great sage cared very much. Then live on. Yi Zichen patted the great sage on the shoulder, then swallowed his words. Saying anything more now was pointless. All he needed was the great sage's self-control. Day and night alternated. When day replaced night and brought dawn to the world, Yi Zichen and the others remained in the Yao realm. Halfway through, Yang Jian took advantage of the great sage's lapse to slip out from beneath the Rui Jingu Bang. This time, he'd learned his lesson. He didn't mention a single word about the possibility of being cuckolded. Instead, he picked up Little Burn and played with the dog. Staying here was the great sage's idea. He said he wanted to use this method to stay with Zixia for a while longer. After that, he might not disturb her life for the rest of his life. Instead, he would silently wish her happiness. Pu Jingwan revealed her rare, emotional side. She covered her face and turned away, her shoulders trembling. Perhaps she cried, or perhaps she hadn't. No one knew what happened when she turned away, but they all knew that it had been a difficult night. How fast! It's already morning. The great sage had been staring up at the sky all night. He spoke in a hoarse voice, then cracked his neck and slapped the ground. He instantly shot to his feet and summoned the Rui Jingu Bang. He spun it around a few times, then slammed it back into the ground. Let's go. This call brought Yi Zichen, Pu Jingwan, and Yang Jian back to their senses. When they arrived in front of him, they heard the great sage laugh heartily. What are you doing? Don't worry too much about me. What's in the past is in the past. Let's hurry back to the God realm. Doesn't Yi Zi have a lot of important business to take care of? Let's not waste any more time. Do you have any idea who it was that delayed us? Asked Yang Jian, who'd been ignored all night. Pu Jingwan glared at him, and Yi Zichen couldn't help but facepalm. Even the howling celestial dog slapped its ears in exasperation. In response, the great sage was even more direct. As soon as Yang Jian said this, he felt his head go dark. He looked up and saw the great sage's Rui Jingu Bang towering into the sky. Yang Jian's expression instantly froze. Monkey bro, don't mess around. Ha ha ha. Yang Jian laughed sheepishly. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. Hurry up and put away your divine abilities. He smelled like dirt, and if he tasted it carefully in his mouth, there were even bits of mud in it. After eating half a night's worth of dirt, Yang Jian didn't want to eat anymore. The great sage snorted, then put the Rui Jingu Bang back into his ear. Yang Jian, frightened, stood obediently to the side and giggled foolishly. Yi Zichen didn't hesitate any longer. He nodded. The way he saw it, it really was best to leave as soon as possible. Leave this place of grief for the great sage. At that moment, Yi Zichen's transmission slip glowed. He took it out and sent his divine sense into it. Xianji's transmission appeared in his sea of consciousness. Chapter 1380. Chapter 1380. Xianji's land, the Lightning Emperor's estate on the central divine mountain. Shao Ting's return to power caused quite a stir in the God realm. It was just like how he'd abdicated all those years ago and passed the throne to Shao Yan. His return was just as abrupt. Quite a few clans had heard rumors that Shao Yan, who'd once been the Lightning Emperor, had been erased from the family records after Shao Ting took the throne. He'd been expelled from the Shao family, and his trusted aides had been expelled as well. This was no small change. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the Shao family had changed dynasties. However, the outside world hadn't heard anything about such a massive change. Only when the Shao family announced it publicly did they learn that Shao Ting was back in charge. However, to the other clans, whether Shao Yan or Shao Ting was in charge made no difference. Some clans came to congratulate Shao Ting upon his ascension, while others continued their business as usual. They weren't affected in the slightest. The Shao family's ancestral mansion. This mansion was the birthplace of the Shao family's ancestors. When the first Lightning Emperor was born, it became a forbidden area. Only the head of the family, the Lightning Emperor, could live here. Xiao Ting, who'd just returned to his position, landed there. He sat cross-legged on a boulder, his eyes closed. Lightning crackled behind him, like dragons and serpents. It was a deep purple, and the air around him cracked. In front of him stood a stooped old man with snow-white hair. His face was covered in wrinkles. This old man had lived even longer than Xiao Ting. In the Lightning Emperor's estate, even Xiao Ting had to address him as Uncle Lin. He'd been the previous Lightning Emperor's errand boy, loyal and devoted to the Lightning Emperor. However, when the previous Lightning Emperor perished, he no longer cared about the clan's affairs. Instead, he found a secluded place to enjoy his remaining years. No one would have guessed that Xiao Ting would find this old errand boy and put him to use. Why does it seem so noisy outside? Xiao Ting slowly withdrew the lightning into his body. When he opened his eyes, lightning flashed. Then he spoke calmly. Xianji has sent her divine generals to demolish buildings and build new ones, said Uncle Lin. What do you mean? Xiao Ting furrowed his brows. Xianji bought the land across from the Lightning Emperor's residence. Right now, she's tearing down the former residences and building new ones. You're saying Xianji bought the land across from our Lightning Emperor's estate? Xiao Ting was stunned. Yes, perhaps Uncle Lin really was in his twilight years. When he spoke, his voice was weak. The young men in the clan told this old man that Xianji bought all the land across from our manor. It's not a small area either. She bought the Liu and Sun family estates as well. It wasn't just the Liu and Sun families. The Wu family and Skyspan Trading Company's branches were bought as well. The Wu clan's divine estate. When the God Emperor had just ascended to the throne, the East Monarch Tai had personally gifted the statue to him. Being situated near the statue of a deity could increase a cultivator's comprehension of the Tao of heaven and earth. It was a rare divine artifact. Tian Xianji Divine Estate. Emperor had Emperor's Tian Divine Wu Dynasty statue, and Ji's XS King's Chun had. Feng Ji's Long Ji's Divine Ji's Chun Ji long ago. However, because the statue was personally gifted by the Demon Emperor, it had an extraordinary significance. The God Emperor naturally couldn't give it to the Shao family. If he did, it would be no different from giving it to the Shao family. It would hurt the Demon Emperor's reputation. Therefore, he placed it outside the Shao family's territory. The left half of the statue was occupied by the Shao family, while the right half of the land was occupied by the rising prices. Countless families wanted to set up their bases here. Of course, those that actually came were not the top families. The great clans all had their own inheritances, so they wouldn't easily change their positions. Even if one's comprehension of the heaven and earth Tao and Dharma would increase by a little with the blessing of the deity statue, which seemed very coveted, only those clans that didn't have a particularly long history would dare to do it. In the end, the right half was split between the three most powerful clans in Heavenly God City at the time, the Liu, Sun, and Wu clans, as well as the Skyspan Trading Company. The larger clans weren't interested in the rest of the smaller territories, so a few wealthy merchants or even smaller clans scooped them up. In the past 10,000 years, there had not been any change in the families here. Now, he suddenly heard that Xianji had bought all the land on the right. Back then, those families had fought tooth and nail for this land. She definitely didn't want to sell it. Xianji had definitely paid a hefty price to buy it from them. Why is she buying this land? Isn't Xianji's manor already in a good position? Does she want to bring her clansmen back from the nine-tailed fox clan? Xiao Ting frowned. I don't know, said Uncle, and Xiao Ting rubbed his chin, his hands trembling. He hurriedly pulled out something that looked like a cigarette, stuffed it into his mouth, and lit it. After taking a few deep breaths, his trembling hands finally stabilized. Afterwards, he let out a few more relaxed sighs. Only then did he calm down and think about Xianji's actions. Any family would drool over a piece of land surrounded by a statue. To put it bluntly, it wouldn't be a problem to establish a 10,000-year foundation here. He was sure the Liu, Sun, and Wu families were thinking the same thing. Otherwise, they wouldn't have burned their boats in cauldrons all those years ago. If Xianji wanted to buy land from them, She had to offer a price that would move them. Her price had to be so high that it far surpassed the value of the land. Only then would they be willing to sell it to her. Then there was the Skyspan Trading Company. The Northern Divine Mountain Sea of Innocence's Shui family was the richest family in the 9 Divine Mountains. Whether it was money or resources, they definitely didn't lack it. If Xianji wanted to buy the land from them, the only possibility was that she owed them a favor. Moreover, this favor would have to be quite large. Otherwise, given that Xianji and the Skyspan Trading Company didn't have a deep relationship, there was no way they would sell the land. Finally, they had to figure out Xianji's motive for buying the land. It was true that Xianji was a member of the Yao Fox clan, but people at their level knew that her relationship with her clan wasn't particularly harmonious. They rarely interacted with each other. She'd only sent her clansmen to the Nine-Tailed Fox clan because they were from the same clan. Furthermore, Xianji had a good relationship with Su Wan and Su Qingyan, which was why she'd asked them to take care of them. Given her relationship with her clan, it was unlikely that she'd pay such a large price to bring them back. He'd even purposely placed it across from the Lightning Emperor's estate. Everyone knew that he hated Yao the most. If she brought her clansmen over and placed them across from the Lightning Emperor's manor, was she trying to piss him off? After mulling it over, even someone as shrewd as Xiao Ting couldn't figure out what Xianji's goal was. At the same time, he finished smoking his cigarette. Then he furrowed his brows. Chapter 1381. Decision made after doubt. It didn't take long for them to travel from the transfer formation to Heavenly God City. Yi Zichen and the others found a nearby town and returned to Heavenly God City in less than an hour. I'm going to my aunt's place. Do you want to come with me? As soon as Yi Zichen left the spatial tunnel, he asked the others. However, there was no point in asking. Pu Jingwan and Yang Jian's mission was to protect him. If they went to Skyspan City, the great sage might even be able to find Wei Jie and the others. But they were in Heavenly God City, and he didn't know anyone here. All he could do was tag along. The others nodded and followed Yi Zichen to the location Xianji had given them. Perhaps because they were in too much of a hurry, they didn't notice the hat-wearing peddler in front of the transfer formation. When he saw Yi Zichen and the others walk out, he immediately put his hat back on, completely covering his face. From start to finish, the peddler paid close attention to their every move. Only after they left did he take out a jade slip and send a message to someone else. The tavern. After renting out the entire tavern leading to the Divine Martial Academy, the heads of Skyspan Academy's student societies took turns waiting inside. They did this to delay Yi Zichen's discovery of Shui Mo's condition as much as possible, or perhaps they didn't want him to find out at all. Murong Shui and Jiang Yong were currently seated in the tavern. Jiang Yong sat at the entrance, his divine sense completely spread out, covering the entire tavern. So long as Yi Zichen appeared, he'd know right away and take action. It didn't matter if they used lies or other methods. As long as they didn't let Yi Zichen enter the Divine Martial Academy and learn of Shui Mo's condition, they'd be fine. This was the result of their joint discussion, and they'd even obtained the Shui family's support. Murong Shui sat in the center of the tavern, the jade slip in her hand glowing with light. Ever since Shui Mo's accident, Murong Shui had been trying to understand her situation through Shui Bei. Before long, the jade slip's light faded. Murong Shui put the jade slip away, and Jiang Yong spoke up. How is Shui Mo? Has she woken up yet? Murong Shui silently shook her head, her eyes brimming with undisguisable grief and self-blame. Even now, she still believed it was her fault that Shui Mo had become like that. When he saw Murong Shui's gaunt, pale face and soulless eyes, Jiang Yong's heart ached. Ever since Shui Mo was sent to the Sea of Innocence, he hadn't seen Murong Shui smile. She was no longer as awe-inspiring as she used to be. She didn't care about anything and was immersed in self-blame all day long. She put all her heart and soul into the jade slip. As long as there was news in the jade slip, she would immediately investigate the inside news. He didn't want to drink tea, eat, or sleep at night. He became thinner and thinner. Jiang Yong loved her very much, and seeing her like this pained him greatly. He wanted to comfort her, but no matter what he said, Morong Shue's expression wouldn't improve. In the end, he understood that all he could do was silently accompany her. That was all. Jiang Yong let out a long sigh, then looked at Morong Shue with concern in his eyes. Afterwards, he focused all of his attention on the streets. Ever since Shue Mo's incident, he'd been having this conversation with Morong Shue a few times a day. Bei said. Morong Shue, who'd been silent for a long time, suddenly spoke up. Jiang Yong immediately turned to look at her. What did she say? In truth, he didn't really care what Shue Bei said. Of course, he cared about Shue Mo's safety. After all, they were good friends. But comparatively, he cared more about Morong Shue. Jiang Yong hadn't said anything just now because he wanted to talk to her. Who cared what Shue Bei said? As long as Morong Shue said a few words, that was enough. She said she saw Shue Mo's transmission slip. There were quite a few messages Zichen sent her. Based on the order of the messages, it seems Zichen suspects something's up with Shue Mo, or anti-upheaval. Bei told me that we absolutely can't let Zichen know about this. She'll help us deceive him. Great Emperor Shuiyang is behind this as well. Jiang Yong was certain that this was the longest Morong Shue had spoken in a long time. However, to his indifference, Yi Zichen's message wasn't particularly friendly. However, Jiang Yong didn't find this strange at all. The way he saw it, Yi Zichen was a shrewd person. Yi Zichen's ability to read people's emotions was far superior to his own. They'd done it in the tavern the night before, and at the time, he'd thought there was nothing wrong with it. But when he thought about it more closely, there were far too many suspicious points. If Yi Zichen didn't suspect anything, it would be strange. What should we do? Morong Shue was practically on the verge of tears. She was certain that the unconscious Shue Mo didn't want Yi Zichen to know about this. In order to make up for this mistake, she had to make sure Yi Zichen never found out. At the very least, not until Shue Mo woke up. Don't be afraid. I'm here. Jiang Yong walked up to Morong Shue and gently patted her on the shoulder. At that moment, the jade slip in Jiang Yong's pocket lit up. He scanned it with his divine sense, then furrowed his brows. He just learned that Yi Zichen had returned to Heavenly God City. How could he have returned so quickly? He'd gotten the news from one of his team members. In truth, the peddler who'd been waiting outside the spatial tunnel was a member of the Aspiration Society. Jiang Yong furrowed his brows. They'd gone to the Yao Realm just last night. Why were they back the next morning? Next, he recalled the spatial tunnel the Yao had constructed in Heavenly God City. He absolutely couldn't panic. He was Morong Shue's pillar of support right now. He had to think of a way to get out of this mess. Since Yi Zichen already suspected them, it would be even more difficult to deceive him later on. They had to find a point where Yi Zichen could absolutely trust them, then divert his suspicions so that he wouldn't think about it. Morong Shue, Jiang Yong, Peng Zheng, and the others didn't even need to think about it. Yi Zichen had sent Shue Mo multiple messages, so he naturally suspected them. Jiang Wei. Jiang Yong suddenly slapped his thigh. He didn't know if this Jiang Wei was good with words or if he disdained to associate with them, but he hadn't come to the tavern last night. Perhaps he didn't think it was beneath him to join them in deceiving Yi Zichen. But now that things had come to this, so long as they explained the stakes, he should be able to help them. Chapter 1382. The Terrifying One Divine Marshal. A few days ago, something unexpected had interrupted the battle of geniuses. Great Emperor Shuiyang had personally come to Heavenly God City to escort Shue Mo back to the Sea of Innocence. At the same time, he'd ordered that no one was allowed to leave the Divine Martial Academy. That day, the participants of the Battle of Geniuses felt the Emperor's wrath erupt like a volcano. However, they also knew that Shuiyang was angry at the person who'd injured his daughter. If he wanted to cause trouble, he'd cause trouble for the person who'd injured her. Practically everyone started mourning that unruly youth, but to their surprise, that youth left the Divine Martial Academy unscathed and returned to the clan. Later, they received word that no one was allowed to speak of this matter, and they were even placed under house arrest. They were clearly innocent, yet they'd been put under house arrest and threatened. The true culprit was bailed out and returned to the clan unscathed. This infuriated quite a few participants. But in the face of the combined pressure of the Central Divine Mountain and Northern Divine Mountain, All they could do was obediently endure. As for anti-upheaval, Shuiyang took them with him to the Sea of Innocence. Morong Shui and the others might be able to do it, but anti-upheaval was different. Their relationship with Shui and Mo was qualitatively different from the other student societies. If they saw Yi Zichen, they'd definitely tell him everything. To avoid that possibility, Shuiyang had to take them away. As for Morong Shui and the others, they could enter the Divine Martial Academy as they pleased because of Shui Yang's authorization. Their goal was simple: keep an eye on Yi Zichen. They couldn't let him take even half a step into the Divine Martial Academy. Although the Central Divine Mountain and Sea of Innocence had already put pressure on them, no one could guarantee that they'd be able to keep their mouths shut. They didn't know why Shuiyang wanted them to do this, but that was what they were thinking, so they agreed. That was how that scene from last night in the tavern had come about. However, there was one person among them who hadn't participated in the deception: Jiang Wei. He'd made it clear that he didn't want to participate, but he also promised not to tell Yi Zichen about Shui Mo. At the time, Zhang Yong and the others hadn't insisted, but now. Jiang Wei, I know you disdain lying, but you really have to help us. Inside the room, Zhang Yong frowned deeply as he tried to persuade Jiang Wei, who was hugging his rusted sword without opening his eyes. This was the only method Jiang Yong could think of. He understood Jiang Wei's personality, and so did Yi Zichen. If they could get Jiang Wei to step forward, even Yi Zichen, who suspected them, would believe them. This was because Jiang Wei's personality was just like that. He was very arrogant, so arrogant that he disdained telling lies. Our performance last night was a little over the top. Brother Yi saw something fishy. Shui Bei told Shui, that Brother Yi is already suspecting us, and that he's already returned to Heavenly God City. No matter what Jiang Yong said, Jiang Wei sat there like a block of wood, hugging his rusted sword. Brother, say something. The fire is burning our eyebrows. You were also there that day. What do you think your chances of winning are if you were to fight him? Suddenly, Jiang Wei said, 20%. I don't think so. Over the past few days, he had stayed in Divine Martial Academy to calculate his odds of winning against that person. 20%. This was the result he had arrived at, taking into account all the elements in his favor. Given Jiang Wei's personality, he really didn't want to admit the gap between him and that person. But the truth was right in front of him. If he'd been in Shui Mo's place, he might have suffered even more. After all, Shui Mo had unleashed the power of her bloodline. The difference in strength was too great. He sat in the stands and watched as Shui Mo was heavily injured. He clenched his fists so tightly that his fingernails dug into his palms. All he could do was suppress the urge to attack and sit there, unmoving. It wasn't just him. Everyone else in Skyspan Academy felt the same way. That person was simply too terrifying, so terrifying that it surpassed the scope of anyone participating in the Battle of Geniuses comprehension. The way Jiang Wei saw it, the only people who could compare to him were Su Luer, the Fox Queen, Sun Yaij, the Holy Maiden of the Nine Li, and Lu Jing, the Four Directions Palace's Highness, who'd never revealed her true strength. Or rather, he was even stronger than the other three. Jiang Yong, who'd been trying to console Jiang Wei all this time, was stunned. He admitted that person was strong, but he hadn't expected Jiang Wei to think he had less than a 20% chance of winning. That guy, if even you think you can't beat him, then what do you think Brother Yi will do? Isn't he just looking to die? If he finds out about Shui Mo's situation, he'll definitely kill that human. Do you think he'll be able to come back alive? Jiang Wei fell silent. That guy, he even dared to attack the Sea of Innocence's second daughter. Do you think they'd dare touch Brother Yi? And you know Brother Ye's background, the Lord of Seven Stars and the Profound Pavilion. If something happens to Brother Yi, what do you think the consequences will be? Jiang Wei suddenly opened his eyes. His hands were trembling. Jiang Yong took advantage of this moment to speak. You're right, Jiang Wei said. It's true, Jiang Wei. I know you're a proud and arrogant person who disdains telling lies like this. We also know your personality, so we didn't insist on you doing it at first. But now, you're our only hope of victory, and your words determine Brother Ye's fate. We're going to kill the human's family and demand justice for Xuanmo. If anything happens to Brother Yi, the Lord of 7 Stars and the profound pavilion will charge straight to our gates, and the God realm will fall into chaos. Or perhaps we can stall for time until Xuanmo wakes up, then explain things to her. Do you really think he'll believe me? Jiang Wei sighed. Besides, do you really think there's any need to be so nervous? Lady Providence is Yi Zichen's aunt and the organizer of the Battle of Geniuses. Do you really think she'll let Yi Zichen do as he pleases? Jiang Yong had long since considered this. It wasn't just him. Murong Shui, Pang Zheng, Di Long, and the Su brothers had all considered this. If even they could think of this, how could great Emperor Shuiyang not? And yet, the great emperor still wanted them to stop Yi Zichen and hide the truth from him. They hadn't thought too deeply about why, but it was absolutely necessary. As a result, Jiang Wei was still their trump card. Whether or not they could hide the truth depended on him. Jiang Yong took a deep breath, but didn't argue with Jiang Wei. Instead, he gazed at him solemnly. All you need to do is tell me whether or not you're going to help. His tone was threatening, but it also seemed like he was ready to give up. Time was of the essence. Jiang Yong didn't want to waste too much time with Jiang Wei. If his pride didn't allow him to lie like this, then leaving right now and discussing countermeasures with the others was the best choice. After a long silence, Jiang Wei nodded. Chapter 1383. Jiang Wei was convinced. Jiang Wei was convinced. Although he was extremely reluctant and didn't want to go against his heart and deceive a general, Jiang Yong's words had shaken him. If Yi Zichen found out about Xuanmo's condition, he'd absolutely seek revenge. This wasn't to say he was reckless. The way Jiang Wei saw it, there was a certain chivalrous spirit in his bones. This was true loyalty. From a moment Yi Zichen entered his line of sight, Jiang Wei had taken note of him. In his heart, he'd subconsciously viewed Yi Zichen as a rival in the path of the sword. They could compare in private and try their best to surpass each other, but neither of them wanted to see anything happen to the other. The person who'd injured Xuanmo was too strong. At the very least, he was stronger than they could handle. If Yi Zichen lost his temper and went looking for trouble with that person, he'd most likely suffer. Given his astonishing background, there was no way he'd let things slide like great Emperor Shuiyang had. This was easy to explain. Sometimes, men would think about the big picture, but most women would not be like that. The Lord of 7 Stars was Yi Zichen's mother, and the profound pavilion's head was his aunt. Both of them could change the fate of the entire god race with a stomp of their feet, and they were women. The god race was currently plagued with internal and external problems. If these two peak factions took action, the situation would worsen. Out of loyalty to his enemy, or for the sake of the greater good, Jiang Wei couldn't let that happen. He didn't hesitate any longer. Convinced, Jiang Wei followed Jiang Yong to the tavern outside the Divine Martial Academy. Since Yi Zichen had already returned to Heavenly God City, they couldn't waste any more time. They had to stop him before he got there. As for what they'd say when they saw him, that would be up to them. However, what they didn't know was that Yi Zichen wasn't returning to the Divine Martial Academy. Even if they knew, they absolutely wouldn't think that cooking was unnecessary. Such caution and concern were all for the sake of nipping the problem in the bud. It didn't matter where Yi Zichen was or why he'd returned to Heavenly God City. All they had to do was do what they had to do. Meanwhile, Yi Zichen had no idea that his return had caused such a chain reaction. He was hurrying to the location Xianji had given him. When they arrived near the place Xianji had told them about, they heard a deafening roar. He looked in the direction of the sound and saw dozens of experts standing in the air, releasing their divine power with all their might. Countless buildings collapsed in front of their eyes, and the building materials left behind by the collapsed buildings were all recovered. After that, the construction team of dozens of people began the construction task in full swing. The efficiency of cultivators is indeed much higher compared to ordinary humans. In just a short while, he saw the outline of a new building begin to appear in the area where the buildings had been destroyed. At this rate, this place would be completely reconstructed in less than 3 days. Yi Zichen couldn't help but sigh. As he sighed, Lady Xianji flashed to his side. "Aunt." At that moment, Yi Zichen put away his expression of greeting. The others simply nodded at Xianji. Pu Jingwan and Yang Jian were outsiders, and their statuses were rather special. Even if he was a great sage, he was now an existence that could firmly suppress Yang Jian. If he still knelt on one knee and greeted like an ordinary person in this realm, it would be unreasonable. "You got here pretty quickly," laughed Xianji. In response, Yi Zichen smiled and nodded. How could they not get here quickly? Yi Zichen's heart had been racing ever since he'd received news of Xianji's arrival. This was the most important part of his plan. What made his heart beat even faster was that the Shao family was right across from them. From now on, he'd be neighbors with the Lightning Emperor. When he'd met with Xianji, he'd asked her to help him buy a plot of land across from the Shao family and use it as Upheaval's headquarters. There were several reasons for doing this, but the most important was to put pressure on Shao Ting. Xiao Yumei and Xiao Yin were on his side. Shao Ting was plotting treason. He definitely knew that Yi Zichen, who was protecting them, was absolutely aware of his despicable actions. Yi Zichen had purposefully set up his headquarters here, so he could openly report this to Shao Ting. "I know everything. I'm here to keep an eye on you. If you want to cause any trouble, you'd best be careful. Forget about the Emperor's plotting to betray the human race. Let's just talk about the grudge between them." That was enough for the two of them to sort things out. Setting up his headquarters here meant that Yi Zichen no longer had to be as cowardly as before. Now, he was strong enough to stand up to the Shao family, the Lightning Emperor's successor. How could Yi Zichen not be excited on such a milestone day? "Just like you said, I bought up all the land around here. Here's a list of expenses. Take a look and remember to pay me back double." She shoved a jade slip into his hands. He probed it with his divine sense, and a vast amount of information poured into his sea of consciousness. It took him a while to process it all. However, this also proved just how much Xianji had paid to buy all this land. After a few breaths of time, he finally absorbed all the information in the jade slip. When he saw the records, Yi Zichen was speechless. The expenses were terrifying, so much so that he didn't even dare calculate just how many digits he'd spent. Don't think it's expensive. This is the territory of the divine statue. No one is willing to sell this land. You were the one who wanted to build your headquarters right across from the Shao family's residence. I had to put aside my pride and bleed profusely to buy this land. Don't forget double. I know. Shao Ting was one of the strongest factions in Heavenly God City. His location was undoubtedly extraordinary. Before asking Xianji to buy the land, he'd already prepared himself for a huge expense. However, this expense was so great that he couldn't remain calm. Fortunately, he had the outside support, so spending even more didn't matter. All he had to do was buy the land. Before, only a few small family clans and the Skyspan Trading Company were here. In truth, the layout of the buildings is pretty good. However, considering that you're a new power, I ordered some people to renovate the place. However, the layout is according to my profound pavilions. That should be fine, right? Asked Xianji. No problem, no problem. Yi Zichen nodded. Have you torn down the Skyspan Trading Company's building? If not, don't. I'll use it. You want to build a trading company? Chapter 1384. Chapter 1384. Mutual pressure. Who else could she be referring to? Naturally, it was the infamous Lightning Emperor Shao Ting. As soon as he said that, Yi Zichen and company saw the majestic, dignified gates of the Shao family manor across the 100-meter wide street. Shao Ting strode out like a dragon or a tiger, accompanied by his old attendant, Uncle. And although Shao Ting was old, his steps were vigorous, and they could sense his thunderous aura as he strode forward. In just a few steps, he arrived before Yi Zichen and the others. Xianji had warned them, and they'd long since been on guard. They looked directly at the Lightning Emperor. What brings our Lightning Emperor here? I heard something happened to your family, and you expelled Xiao Yin from the clan. Why aren't you at home dealing with that mess? Why do you have the time to come out for a stroll? Xianji smiled, but her words were like thorns stabbing into Shao Ting's heart. Her relationship with the Shao family hadn't been particularly harmonious. She didn't know why, but ever since she'd taken up her post in the God Realm, she'd found this old man an eyesore. Although they both worked for the God Emperor's estate, they couldn't even maintain the most basic semblance of brotherhood. On their way here, Xiao Ting's heart sank further and further because he saw Yi Zichen. It was just as Yi Zichen had guessed. The way Xiao Ting saw it, he'd definitely received some unfavorable information from Xiao Yumei and Xiao Yan. Xiao Ting's previous threats were, in truth, an attempt to force the two of them to divulge this matter to the public. Given his past accomplishments and his influence in the God Realm, there was no way the God Realm would trust him unconditionally. That way, he could use his status to make a false accusation, throw dirty water on Xiao Yumei and Xiao Yan, and avoid any future troubles. To his surprise, though, his son and daughter were far more composed than he'd expected. She hadn't mentioned the slightest bit of her secret dealings with the demons, and this youth had even protected her. His entire plan had gone up in smoke. Now he'd appeared here. Thunder, punishing Emperor, why are you staring at my precious nephew? I'm talking to you, but you're ignoring me. You're not giving me any face at all, are you? Xianji smiled calmly. It's nothing. I just met him once before. Xiao Ting chuckled, then glanced at the renovated building across from them. It looks like our Xiao family will be neighbors with the profound pavilion in the future. It must have been difficult to buy this piece of land from them. Of course. Xianji nodded. But we can't be neighbors. Your new neighbor is here. He pointed to the side. When Xiao Ting looked over, Yi Zichen smiled noncommittally. Hello. Let me reintroduce myself. I'm Yi Zichen of the Upheaval Gang. Forget it. Using that name now makes me seem a little underwhelming. I'll stick with the Upheaval Alliance. Alliance leader. In the future, we will be neighbors. I hope that the thunder-punishing Emperor can help me. Even with Xiao Ting's shrewdness, when he heard this news, the muscles on his face stiffened. As expected, he had said that Xianji had no reason to spend so much money to buy this land. He hadn't expected that the one who wanted to be his neighbor was this young man. What was he trying to do? Intimidate him? Xianji, you really are generous. You actually bought this place for your nephew's faction. I can't help but criticize you. At our level, we all know that your nephew is still young, yet you gave him such a high starting point. I'm happy to. Before Xiao Ting could finish, Xianji mercilessly cut him off. He's my only nephew. I'd be happy to spend as much as I wanted. Yet, you still want to get involved? Who do you think you are? The God Emperor? Xiao Ting's expression instantly grew cold. By now, they both knew that Xianji and the others knew that Xiao Ting was involved with the demons, and Xiao Ting knew that they knew. Since they didn't want to give him face, there was no need for him to give them face. Then can I ask if you're purposely trying to build a faction here because this is the best land in all of Heavenly God City. I'm buying land for my precious nephew, so I naturally have to buy the best. Is there a problem with that? Don't be so paranoid all day. Or perhaps you're just feeling guilty. Xianji laughed meaningfully. Xianji knew. Reading between the lines, Xiao Ting gleaned a bit of information. Xiao Ting narrowed his eyes and laughed, then dropped the subject. His gaze landed on Yi Zichen. My good-for-nothing son is staying with you. I hope he hasn't caused you any trouble. His name has already been erased from the family tree. What's the point of calling him son? Sneered Xianji. Xiao Ting pretended not to hear. Yi Zichen smiled and nodded. What trouble could there be? My family has a lot of assets. It's just taking care of a few hundred people. It's no big deal. That's true. You have the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, and your family's resources are incomparable to those of ordinary families. Since you're trying to build a faction here, as someone who's experienced it, I have to give you a few words of advice. Go ahead, said Yi Zichen. You do indeed have quite a few experts by your side. With their help and the profound pavilion's backing, your faction can rise to the ranks of first-rate factions. But your pagoda's resources will run out sooner or later. When that time comes, will the experts you've won over still be loyal to your faction? Laughed Xiao Ting. That's right, said Xiao Ting. Even now, Xiao Ting still believed that Yi Zichen's resources came from the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Yi Zichen didn't point that out. He simply smiled calmly. At the end of the day, your cultivation is too low. You're not qualified to manage a first-rate faction. Furthermore, competition in Heavenly God City is fierce. Most experts are personally nurtured by their families, or they have some other tricks up their sleeves. You don't have any of that. That was where Xiao Ting stopped. Yi Zichen couldn't deny that most of what he said made sense. Unfortunately, he'd mistakenly assumed that the 20 rulers had been recruited with resources, and he'd misunderstood his relationship with Yang Jian and Pu Jingwan. Indeed, his cultivation was too low. He couldn't become the leader of a faction on the surface. Yang Jian could. The great sage could. Pu Jingwan could too. So long as they were willing, Yi Zichen could hand over his position to any of them. Even if they didn't want to, with their support, who could deny Yi Zichen's right to lead? Yi Zichen said nothing. Xiao Ting smiled indifferently. A few days ago, I met you for the first time. I already knew you were a dragon among men. Ambition is a good thing, but it's not something you can achieve overnight. There are many other things to learn, and this is Heavenly God City. Little friend, you're still young, and your talent is shallow. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I'll tell you everything I know. Thank you, Lightning Emperor, for your kindness. I'm eternally grateful. This sort of verbal attack was practically negligible to Yi Zichen. Was he trying to subtly pressure him? Yi Zichen could do it too. Xiao Ting laughed, then heard Yi Zichen speak again. But Emperor, you said something wrong. You said we met for the first time a few days ago. What? Wasn't that the case? That's impossible. Given your dragon aura, so long as I saw you, I'd definitely remember you. I'd never forget. In truth, if I told you, you'd never forget either. Yi Zichen lowered his gaze and stared straight at Xiao Ting's insincere smile. Chapter 1385. Chapter 1385. The Xiao family's hidden danger. It was enough to stop where it was appropriate. When Yi Zichen mentioned 100 bolts of tribulation lightning, he trusted Xiao Ting would know what he meant. Xiao Ting definitely hadn't expected this. That youth who'd been repeatedly prevented from entering the god realm was him. Not only had he been reborn from the ashes of tribulation lightning, but he was now standing proudly in front of Xiao Ting as a challenger. Yi Zichen smiled at Xiao Ting, his gaze indicating he was sending him off. Yang Jian gestured for Xiao Ting to leave. He wanted to personally escort the Lightning Emperor back to the Xiao family estate, which was only a few dozen meters away. Xiao Ting's expression shifted, but given his shrewdness, he naturally didn't act unnaturally. No matter how shocked he was in his heart, he still maintained his composure like a deep pool of water. He didn't say anything. By now, he and Yi Zichen had a tacit understanding. They both knew each other's identities and their future relationship. Yi Zichen turned indifferently, flicked his sleeves, and left. Yang Jian personally escorted him to the Xiao family estate. However, when they arrived at the gates, Xiao Ting didn't shy away from chatting with Yang Jian for a long time. After entering, Xiao Ting's eyes twinkled with amusement. Yang Jian nodded and bowed respectfully as he watched him enter. Look at how much of a bootlicker he is. The two of them were definitely up to no good. The great sage curled his lips. The others chuckled and nodded. Before long, Yang Jian ran back, no longer smiling obsequiously. Instead, his eyes brimmed with disdain as he approached Yi Zichen and the others. Do you know what that old geezer said to me just now? He saw that you were well-built and wanted to take you in as a concubine. Yi Zichen didn't know where the great sage had learned this from, but his taunting went straight to the point. Is there something wrong with your brain? Cursed Yang Jian. Isn't what IOL's son said? Back in the heavenly court, weren't you happy to show off your figure to those fairies? If that's the case, it'd be a good home for you. As he listened to the great sage's mockery, Yi Zichen couldn't help but think back to when he'd first entered the heavenly court. At the time, they'd been looking for a general agent. All the immortals had displayed their various divine abilities. Back then, Yang Jian had done aerobics with them, showing off his figure. Thinking about it this way, the great sage was right. Yang Jian's face turned green, but he couldn't beat this monkey. All he could do was glare at him fiercely and explain. Just now, that old guy actually wanted to bribe me to go to his side, but I have to say, that old guy's offer is really tempting. After that, it triggered your restless heart. You must have thought that the other party's offer was too high, so you agreed to stay and be a spy for them. Looking at your fawning manner just now, it's definitely the case. Before he even finished speaking, the great sage took out the Rui Jingu Bang. His eyes flashed. Catch. Let's see if I, old son, will waste your life, you spy. As he spoke, the Rui Jingu Bang in his hand swung downwards. Yang Jian's eyebrows furrowed, and the Erlang lance appeared in his hand. He blocked with his saber, and the Rui Jingu Bang was knocked away. He couldn't take it anymore, so he raised his saber and started fighting the great sage. Why are they fighting? Pu Jingwan didn't quite understand what was going on. The two of them were fighting for no reason at all. Anyone could tell that the great sage was only half joking. How come they'd suddenly started fighting? Don't mind them too much. They're always like this. Yi Zichen had known them for a long time, so he didn't take it too seriously. Always like this. Pu Jingwan sighed in amazement and smiled wryly. She couldn't help but mutter to herself, these two brothers really are special. Yi Zichen sighed as he watched the two of them fight in the air above Heavenly God City. Quite a few patrolling guards noticed the commotion and hurried over. However, Yang Jian and the great sage were both outstanding sovereigns, and the ripples of energy released by their battle were enough to cause the great sage to tremble violently. The energy fluctuations they released weren't something the guards could withstand. Even the rulers of the city fell silent when they sensed their auras. They simply let the two of them fight. They're really direct. As the two brothers fought, Yi Zichen recalled Yang Jian's words and couldn't help but chuckle and shake his head. It seems he really underestimated me. Does he think he can poach my people as he pleases? I'm Skyspan Academy's #1 excavator. I've always been the one poaching others. This is the first time I've seen someone try to poach my people. He wasn't boasting. When Yi Zichen first joined Anti-Upheaval, he'd single-handedly poached the Grizzly Bear Society into a miserable state. That was how the two of them became enemies. However, after Xianji revealed her background, Pang Zheng and Di Long buried the hatchet and made peace. Xiao Ting was blatantly poaching Yi Zichen. It was clear that he didn't take Yi Zichen seriously at all. That's a good thing for you, said Xianji. He doesn't know you have the outside support. He simply thinks you're relying on me and the Yao Ceiling Pagoda to challenge him. That's definitely not a bad thing for you. I know. Yi Zichen nodded. When Yang Jian returned from the Xiao family, Xianji and Pu Jingwan had joined forces to lay down seals around them. That's why they dare to talk so openly. Otherwise, although this seemed like Xianji's territory, it was right next to the Xiao families. The Xiao family might eavesdrop on their conversation. Even after they finished building their headquarters, Yi Zichen had to hire a formation grandmaster to set up formations around it. That way, the Xiao family wouldn't be able to spy on them. Perhaps she was worried that Yi Zichen wouldn't take what she'd just said to heart, so she deliberately deepened his understanding of the Lightning Emperor's Xiao family. Don't underestimate the Xiao family. No matter what, they're a descendant of the Lightning Emperor's clan. Their foundation is far more than what you see. If you want to talk about the God Realm's sacred lands, I don't even need to mention them. They've existed since the beginning of the era, so you can imagine how deep their foundations are. After Zhou Wu ascended to the throne, he supported a few clans. I'm afraid of them as well. Finally, there's the Lightning Emperor's Xiao family. Although I mentioned the Xiao family last, the way I see it, of all the factions I mentioned, the Xiao family is the most difficult to deal with. Don't forget, they control the myriad realms' lightning tribulation. They control heavenly lightning. Even Bai An's heavenly lightning came from the Xiao family. Do you understand what I'm saying? How could he not? What Xianji was trying to say was that if the Xiao family really wanted to, they could control heavenly lightning through the lightning pool. If they fought them, it was entirely possible that they'd be struck by heavenly lightning. The most worrisome thing was that, if the Xiao family really did control heavenly lightning, how much could they control? Yi Zichen, who'd personally experienced heavenly lightning, knew that each bolt was stronger than the last. If the Xiao family didn't stop sending lightning, not even the God Emperor could withstand it. Chapter 1386. A whim. The Xiao family's lightning pool was definitely a variable. If the number of lightning tribulations was truly controlled by the Xiao family, Then 30,000 lightning controllers could send lightning bolts into the lightning pool. What would happen to the experts of the god race? No matter how high his cultivation base was, could he withstand countless bolts of lightning striking his body? Can we snatch this broken thing for him? All of a sudden, Yi Zichen felt the urge to become a bandit. There were simply too many variables in a lightning pool, and Xiao Ting was now working with the demons in Yao. If the lightning pools continued to be controlled by the Xiao family, it wouldn't be a good thing for him. However, this was just a thought, just like how Yi Zichen had wanted to destroy the Divine Mountain or rebuild it. All of this seemed too shocking. Even if it could really be done, it would be next to impossible. Right now, he was still stuck in the half-step celestial being realm. If he really wanted to do these things, he would probably have to transcend. Since seizing the lightning pool was a pipe dream, it shouldn't be a problem to insert a high-ranking member of the Xiao family, right? After a moment's thought, Yi Zichen suddenly looked up at Yang Jian and the Great Sage, who were still locked in a fierce battle. Although neither of them had lost yet, it was clear that Yang Jian's side was in a disadvantageous position. The two of them were probably fighting on the spur of the moment. The Great Sage was itching to teach Yang Jian a lesson. Yang Jian wasn't a pushover either. He was determined to fight the Great Sage head-on. However, this scene gave rise to an idea in Yi Zichen's heart. Jingwan, don't let them fight. If they keep fighting, someone will die. This was Heavenly God City, the capital of the God race. My aunt is a high-ranking member of the God Emperor's estate. Don't make things difficult for her. For you to still think of me, your aunt, I really must thank you. Xian Ji smiled faintly. Pu Jingwan stepped forward to stop them. The Great Sage, who had the upper hand, held his head high and puffed out his chest when he came down. On the way back, he kept provoking Yang Jian. Yang Jian, on the other hand, looked displeased, but his verbal skills were not inferior to the Great Sage's at all. For every sentence the Great Sage said, he could retort back with 10. The Great Sage's eyes widened, and he looked like he was going to continue fighting. Yi Zichen, on the other hand, was extremely satisfied. This was exactly the effect he'd wanted. He knew that Yang Jian and the Great Sage had always been like this. They fought every day, but their feelings for each other were actually stronger than anyone else's. Xiao Ting had no idea. Brother, just say that he's a lackey or not. Just now, I said something bad about Xiao Ting, and now that stupid son of mine is King cursing me. Oh well, son. The Great Sage descended from the heavens and continuously criticized Yang Jian. CK off. I really should have taken advantage of the fact that you're still a celestial being to chop off your head and eat monkey brains to nourish my body. Yang Jian glared at him angrily. Pu Jingwan, who'd followed them down, couldn't help but put a hand to her forehead. Even Xian Ji was dumbfounded. These two were really dominators. Why were they cursing like hooligans on the street? Both of you, stop talking. After calming them down, Yi Zichen sent a transmission to Yang Jian, Xian Ji, the Great Sage, and Pu Jingwan. After receiving Yi Zichen's transmission, they silently reinforced the restrictions around them. What's wrong? Asked Yang Jian. I suddenly had an idea. Within the restrictions, Yi Zichen gesticulated as he explained his plan. However, halfway through, he glared at Yang Jian sternly, almost as if he were berating him. Yang Jian hefted his lance and did his best to explain himself. What did the other side say? Within the Xiao family estate, Xiao Ting sat on his throne and asked Uncle, and I don't know. They've set up a seal, so there's no way to know what they're talking about. However, that Yang Jian guy started fighting with them, and they fought fiercely at that. As they fought, that Yao even called Yang Jian a lackey. Is that so? Xiao Ting nodded. Later, perhaps that youth didn't want to see them fight amongst themselves, so he sent someone to take them away. Once they entered the restriction, they're fighting again. Xiao Ting smiled coldly and took another drag of his cigarette. Try to get in touch with Yang Jian. If you can rope him in, that'd be for the best. However, don't trust him too much. No one can say for sure that this isn't just an act. I know. Uncle nodded. Xiao Ting took a few deep drags from his cigarette. Then his eyes grew hazy and trembled. He snorted and laughed. Oomph. They don't have a sense of belonging. They're just trying to rope in a few people with resources. How laughable. Bro, are you sure this will work? After Yizichin explained his plan, the great sage knit his brows. This is a risky move. If something happens in the middle of it, or if the other side catches on, Yang Jian's life will be forfeit. Besides, given his intelligence, are you sure he's up to the task? Who are you looking down on? Yang Jian glared. I think it's a risky move too, but it's doable, but it really is dangerous. Xianji hesitated for a moment, then nodded. In truth, Yi Zichen's idea had come to him on a whim. Everyone else said it was dangerous, so he hesitated. I'll go. When he saw Yi Zichen's expression change, Yang Jian said seriously, I'm just going to be a spy. What's there to be afraid of? Even if he restricts me from using jade slips, we both have phones. If anything happens to me, you can come save me. You're so close. Can't you just call him? Are you sure you want to go? It's really dangerous to be a spy. Have you seen cop movies? 8 out of 10 spies will die, and only the main character will survive, Yi Zichin asked. Then, I won't go. Yang Jian instantly cowered. You'd better go. After a moment's thought, Yi Zichin decided to give Yang Jian an important task. He had to plant someone in the Xiao family, and the timing was right. If the great sage fought with him, he'd accidentally pushed Yang Jian closer to the Xiao family side. If he didn't even use this, it'd be a huge loss. It was just as Yang Jian said. If the Xiao family restricted him from using jade slips, he could use his phone. If something really went wrong, he could just call the enemy's door. All right, I'll go. Yang Jian nodded without hesitation. Don't be fooled by the great sage's constant annoyance at Yang Jian, but right now, there was a hint of worry in his eyes. Yang Jian noticed his expression and laughed. He patted him on the shoulder to comfort him, but the great sage slapped his arm away and hit him with his staff. You're crazy, Yang Jian cursed. You're the crazy one. The great sage glared at him. You go to the enemy's door, but definitely watching us. You heard Zichen's plan. Now you're putting your arm around my shoulder? Do you want to die? Yang Jian shivered. He instantly got into character, widened his eyes, and took half a step back. From an outsider's point of view, it looked as if the two of them had truly reached a boiling point. Chapter 1387. A prelude to going undercover. Man proposes, God disposes. For this passage to become a classic and be passed down to later generations, it naturally had its own wisdom. Take Yi Zichin, for example. No matter how meticulous his plans were, he'd never imagined he'd have an opportunity to plant an absolutely trustworthy spy in the Xiao family. He should be grateful that the heavens were on his side. From the looks of it, everything was going in his favor. As for what other variables might arise in the future, he didn't need to worry about them for now. Right now, he had to figure out a way to quietly insert Yang Jian into the group without arousing Xiao Ting's suspicions. Everyone was waiting for Yi Zichen's plan. Of course, Xianji didn't want to get involved. Given her current position, buying the land for Yi Zichin was already the limit of what she could do. If she gave him advice, she might as well cross that line. She simply crossed her arms and looked elsewhere. Yi Zichin sensed her actions, but he knew that she didn't want to get involved, so he didn't mind too much. The way he saw it, he was already grateful that his aunt had done so much for him. Plant Yang Jian inside the Xiao family. Yi Zichin rubbed his chin, then glanced obscurely at the majestic manor across from him. This was a residence of the Lightning Emperor's family that had existed for generations. Outsiders could only see its grandeur and majesty on the outside, but who knew what sort of undercurrents were brewing inside? Especially at a time like this, when Xiao Ting was secretly working with the demons and Yao. Yi Zichin wasn't sure whether or not everyone in the clan knew about this, but he was sure that some people already knew. The Xiao family would be even more cautious now, even if Xiao Ting had taken the initiative to contact Yang Jian. That didn't mean that sending him over wouldn't raise suspicions. Furthermore, the Xiao family had stood strong for generations. If Yang Jian went undercover, he'd be surrounded by danger. On the surface, Yi Zichin and the others would attack as soon as something happened to him, but no one could be sure that Yang Jian wouldn't be able to send a signal of danger. Whether it was for his safety or for the success of the operation, They had to make sure nothing went wrong. There's no rush. After a long period of thought, Yi Zichen's expression darkened. If we just send Yang Jian over, it'll seem too urgent. According to normal thinking, even if we really suspected Yang Jian, we would need a transitional period to accumulate contradictions. When this conflict reaches its peak and erupts, it's only reasonable for him to seek refuge with the Shao family. With that, Yi Zichen glanced at Yang Jian and reminded him, during this period, the Shao family may send someone to contact you. You must not appear too anxious. She could have the intention to go to his place, but she definitely could not show that she yearned for it. Because if your performance is too excessive, even if the other party doesn't suspect your motive for going there, they will still think that you are a disloyal person and won't put you in an important position. This was the most basic understanding of human nature. Everyone has their own selfish desires. For the sake of their own future, anyone would make a choice. A fine bird chooses a tree to nest in, and a cultivator, for the sake of self-development, would choose to increase the efficiency of his forces. This was naturally not wrong. But if Yang Jian really thought that the other side's offer was higher, then he would be more inclined to the other side's intentions. Then wouldn't the Shao family worry that someone could poach Yang Jian if they offered a higher price? They would worry. That way, they naturally wouldn't let Yang Jian come into contact with the Shao family's core secrets. After all, if Yang Jian was poached away, he would take their family's secrets with him. If Yang Jian truly wanted to gain their trust, he had to demonstrate his loyalty. However, Yi Zichen's distrust of him infuriated him. He had no other choice but to seek refuge with Shao Ting. That was the only way he could gain Shao Ting's trust, or at least be treated as an equal. Yang Jian listened to Yi Zichen's analysis and nodded. Yi Zichen continued. Also, for now, don't act too intimately with the great sage. The source of your conflict with me is the great sage himself. You have to constantly oppose him, and he'll always be suspicious of you. You can quarrel or even fight along the way. That'll make it seem more realistic. Understood. Yang Jian and the great sage nodded at practically the same time, then glared angrily at each other. It looked like they wanted to fight, but since Yi Zichen and Pu Jingwan were still there, they didn't. Even so, the disdain and fury in their eyes were clear. When he saw this, Yi Zichen couldn't help but nod. He needed to get into character now. To Yi Zichen's surprise, Pu Jingwan was also an actress. She hadn't been assigned any scenes, but she'd taken the initiative to put herself between the two of them. She anxiously tried to calm him down. That was better and more realistic. Shao Ting's favorable impression of Yang Jian had led to Yi Zichen's sudden inspiration. Now, the drama unfolded. As for what happened next, he'd do his best and leave it up to the heavens. There was no need to act too much. Yang Jian and the great sage had stopped fighting, and that was that. If he continued, it would seem like he was putting too much effort into his acting. As the leader of their alliance, Yi Zichen had to be impartial. He also had to show that his cultivation was too low, and that he wanted to interfere but couldn't. Yi Zichen pretended to sigh helplessly, then walked up to Xianji. Little guy, you've got a good grasp of human nature. Xianji smiled without even looking back. Yi Zichen smiled calmly back at her. Never mind the fact that he'd lived for a long time and seen all kinds of people, even back in the modern realm, he'd learned a thing or two for watching TV shows. Right? Annie, you're paying attention to the battle of geniuses, right? Asked Yi Zichen. Yi Zichen remembered Murong Shui and the other's strange behavior, as well as his worry about anti-upheaval situation. He wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to ask Xianji about the situation. What's wrong? Asked Xianji. It's nothing. I just wanted to know how anti-upheaval is doing. I haven't contacted them in a long time, so I wanted to know how they're doing. In truth, Yi Zichen didn't really care. He never thought things would be that bad. This was Heavenly God City. The way he saw it, they couldn't afford to cause too much trouble. At most, they'd just suffer some minor injuries and be eliminated. He asked Xianji purely for the sake of peace of mind. Little did he know, when he mentioned anti-upheaval, Xianji's expression stiffened. She paused for at least half a breath of time before replying. They are doing fine. That's good. Yi Zichen nodded without even looking back. At that moment, he suddenly saw one of Xian Ji's divine generals, Strength God, smash it to the ground with his hammer. For some reason, he had a bad feeling. He turned his head and spoke to Xian Ji. He turned to Xian Ji and said, "Annie, I told you not to demolish the Skyspan Trading Company. You haven't forgotten, have you? Do you think I'm senile? I just told you, so I forget?" Xian Ji rolled her eyes and pointed. "Isn't that the Skyspan Trading Company? I specially gave it to you." Halfway through her sentence, she turned to look at the Skyspan Trading Company's territory and happened to see its divine general, Strength God, smashing his hammer into a 9-story building. In an instant, her eyes flashed with an embarrassed smile. Chapter 1388. A tour half a month passed in the blink of an eye. Fortunately, Xianji had stopped the Skyspan Trading Company in time. Not too many of their original buildings had been destroyed. Only that building had been destroyed. It's worth mentioning that during this time, the Upheaval Alliance entered the sights of many factions in Heavenly God City. After all, the statue and the Lightning Emperor's estate were the focus of everyone's attention. Quite a few people from the other Divine Mountains came to take a look and experience the wonders of the statue. Furthermore, the Upheaval Alliance had caused quite a stir, and they had Xianji's support. Factions big and small in Heavenly God City gradually learned of the Upheaval Alliance's existence. Quite a few clans even sent people to pay their respects and meet them. During this half a month, Yi Zichen was truly busy. In addition to sending Wei Jie and the others from the northern Divine Mountain here, he released all the Yao from the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. He even sent people to bring the Earth's supreme level Yao servants he'd left in the lower Divine Mountains to Heavenly God City. Only a small group of them remained to protect Upheaval. When the lower Divine Mountains Upheaval found out about their headquarters in Heavenly God City, their desire to raise their cultivation was stimulated. Before long, the first batch of lower Divine Mountains Upheaval members would join the Upheaval Alliance. Yi Zichen didn't have time to spare, so he didn't even think about going to the Divine Martial Academy. Furthermore, Xianji had personally told him that anti-upheaval was fine, so he focused all his attention on building the Upheaval Alliance. However, even if he didn't go, someone else came looking for him. "Boss, there's a guy named Jiang Wei outside with a few men and women. He says he's your friend and wants to see you," said Wei Jie as he hurried over to Yi Zichen. Jiang Wei. Yi Zichen couldn't help but be surprised. The Upheaval Alliance really had caused quite a stir. It wasn't strange that Skyspan Trading Company's friends knew he was behind it. If Jiang Yong and the others had come, it wouldn't have mattered, but Jiang Wei had come? Yi Zichen found it hard to believe. "Let's go take a look." By now, Jiang Wei and the others had already been brought to the reception area. Xiao Yumei personally welcomed them. When Yi Zichen and Wei Jie arrived at the hall's entrance, he saw, to his astonishment, the heads of the various student societies they'd come with. Among them, the one nodding and thanking Xiao Yumei with his rusted sword was none other than the navigator's Jiang Wei. "Zichen." Xiao Yumei was the first to notice him. The moment she spoke, the other team leaders all stood up and looked over. Xiao Yumei gave him a gentle nod and smiled back at him before leaving the hall. Only then did the group truly surround him. Jiang Yong patted him on the shoulder a few times. "Brother Yi, you're good. We're still small presidents in the academy. You really can't compare with others. You want to compare yourself to Zichen? His brain is several times sharper than yours," said Morong Shui, rolling her eyes. "Brother Yi, that's an interesting name. Upheaval Alliance. Everyone knows Brother Yi belongs to anti-upheaval," teased Su Chao. In truth, Yi Zichen had considered this name when he first joined anti-upheaval. He was speechless. Back then, his faction was clearly upheaval, but Shuemo's faction was pacifists. Yi Zichen smiled wryly and shook his head. "Don't make fun of me. The Upheaval Alliance is an organization I founded back when I was still in the lower lands. Back then, it was called the Upheaval Gang, but now that I'm on the Divine Mountains, it's a bit small, so I just called it the Upheaval Alliance. But you have to admit, I really do feel like I have an ill-fated relationship with anti-upheaval." Everyone laughed. After chatting for a while, they all wanted to take a look at the Upheaval Alliance. Yi Zichen agreed, but the Upheaval Alliance took up too much space. If they walked, they might not even see a third of it in a day, so they could only fly for a brief tour. This area is where the Upheaval Alliance's members live. This is where pill refiners, artifact refiners, talisman masters, and a few formation masters work. This is the training field. This is the library of secrets. This is the trade district. For a full hour, Yi Zichen explained the Upheaval Alliance's situation to his old friends. You've seen the gist of it by now. It's not completely built yet. I originally wanted to invite you over to take a look once it was done. Even if cultivators were skilled in craftsmanship, the area was simply too vast. Even after all this time, they'd only managed to repair 30% of it. Even so, the Upheaval Alliance was majestic. Just by listening to Yi Zichen's plans, Jiang Yong and the others were convinced that, in time, the Upheaval Alliance would naturally gain a foothold in the God Realm. Brother Yi, you're truly extraordinary. Pang Zheng clicked his tongue in wonder. The others nodded in agreement, but Jiang Wei seemed troubled. It's all right. Yi Zichen chuckled. In the future, how about we Grizzly Bear Society members come directly to you? Laughed Pang Zheng. After learning that he and Yi Zichen weren't on the same level, Pang Zheng no longer felt any hostility towards Yi Zichen. That was especially true when he saw Yi Zichen's massive plans. His heart sank, but at the same time, he wanted to stick close to him. This was absolutely true. He really wanted to stick close to Yi Zichen. If he could form a relationship with Yi Zichen, he'd have backers like the Profound Pavilion, the Saint's Palace, and the Sea of Unforgettable. His Pang family had a bit of influence on the Northern Divine Mountain, but compared to these factions, they were still far behind. Furthermore, judging from Yi Zichen's current plans, the Upheaval Alliance was bound to become a first-rate faction, perhaps even a peak one. There was no harm in sticking with him. This explanation stunned Yi Zichen. He found it hard to understand what Pang Zheng was thinking, but at the same time, he somewhat understood. Pang Zheng couldn't stay in Skyspan Academy forever. He had to leave. He saw Yi Zichen's powerful backer, as well as his potential. He wanted to join Yi Zichen's side ahead of time. For him, this was a decent path forward. In truth, Yi Zichen was somewhat tempted by Pang Zheng's words. Right now, the Upheaval Alliance lacked manpower the most. Even if he released all the Yao from the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, they were still far from a peak faction like the Shao family. But if the Grizzly Bear Society graduated, they'd have an endless supply of new blood flowing into the Upheaval Alliance. This was absolutely a good thing for the Upheaval Alliance. Perhaps because he'd been thinking it over for too long, when the others saw that he wasn't going to say anything, Di Long hurriedly interrupted with a laugh. Pang Zheng, you're so smart. You know how to suck up to someone powerful. Why don't you take a look at how many Yao servants there are? Brother Yi has the Yao Ceiling Pagoda. Do you really think he'll lack us? Di Long's original intention was to ease the awkwardness, but when Yi Zichen heard that, he panicked. Chapter 1389. A deal when it came to supreme-level experts. The 9 Divine Mountains Academies had more than 70% of them. The other 25% belonged to their families. In the end, only 5% belonged to independent cultivators. If the Upheaval Alliance wanted to grow, they couldn't do without supreme-level experts. They didn't even need to think about their family's training. Most of them had a lofty sense of family honor and swore loyalty to their clans. As for the remaining 5%, they didn't even need to think about it. What right did he have to join a newly established faction like Yi Zichen's if he didn't join an academy and a family that had existed for many years? The only way he could get supreme-level experts was to recruit them from these academies. However, take the Northern Divine Mountain as an example. More than 70% of the Northern Divine Mountain's Skyspan Academy students were supreme-level experts. Most of them had ascended from the Infinite Realms. Since they didn't have any family backing, one reason for going to Skyspan Academy was to study, was because they wanted to seek refuge in this unfamiliar environment. However, they had to graduate sooner or later. Once they left Skyspan Academy, they had to think of a way out. Joining societies was one way for them to find a new master. Murong Shui, Pang Zheng, and Jiang Yong were direct descendants of their families. They came to Skyspan Academy to recruit new blood for their families while they were there. When the time came, their students would, barring any accidents, pledge loyalty to their families as well. Yizichin didn't know much about the other academies, but given Skyspan Academy's scope, there shouldn't be too much of a difference. This sort of behavior had gradually become a fixed pattern. This was why the God Realm was like a pool of stagnant water. Everything was set in stone. Large clans grew larger and larger, while small clans grew smaller and smaller. Some were even destroyed. They had no choice but to seek protection from a major faction or directly join it. With this sort of fixed structure, it was difficult for new factions to take root and develop. Yizichin, who had the Yao Ceiling Pagoda, was an exception. His early development was supported by the pagoda's Yao servants. Furthermore, he had the profound pavilion and the star altar, as well as the Society of Saints. They were his most reliable backers and gimmicks. However, if he continued like this, he wouldn't be able to become a first-rate faction. In the future, he'd have to oppose the Lightning Emperor's estate in Zhou. His upheaval alliance had to grow, and it had to grow as fast as possible. If Pang Zheng really did intend to send his Grizzly Bear Society graduates to the Upheaval Alliance, then he wouldn't be able to do so. To be able to graduate from Skyspan Academy, regardless of their ultimate cultivation, they had at least received systematic training and education. This was exactly what Yizichin lacked. The Grizzly Bear Society had more than 1 million members. That meant they had 1 million Supremes, perhaps even Diviners. They were all siding with the Upheaval Alliance. How could Yizichin not be moved? He was anxious, indeed anxious. He was almost anxious to the point that he directly grabbed Pang Zheng's shoulder and asked in a particularly concerned tone, "What you said just now is true, right?" Yizichin's tone and the seriousness in his eyes stunned Pang Zheng. The way he saw it, a family's true strength was still determined by its top-notch battle prowess. Most of the students who graduated from Skyspan Academy were Earth Supremes, with a few Sky Supremes and an extremely small number of Celestials. Of these people, only the Celestials could be of some use to the family. The rest were mostly just a drain on the family's resources. He'd only said it in passing, but he hadn't expected Yizichin to care so much. Of course. Pang Zheng nodded, then continued. "But Brother Yi, don't think I'm being stingy. I can't hand over platoon leaders or experts who've graduated to 7th-stage Sky Supremes or higher. My family needs them too." "Sure." Yizichin nodded. Yizichin knew full well that no matter how generous Pang Zheng was, there was no way he'd hand over true elites to Yizichin. Pang Zheng's goal here was to help his family find true elites. If he handed them all to Yizichin, how could his family develop? But top-notch elites? Yizichin had no shortage of them. The 3rd floor of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda had tens of thousands of diviner-level Yao servants, 20 rulers, and top-tier experts like Yang Jian, the Great Sage, and Pu Jingwan. Yizichin lacked low-level elites. To Pang Zheng and his family, these low-level elites were a burden, but to Yizichin, they were sweet nectar. You should be like Pang Zheng, right? Your family only needs top-notch battle prowess. In that case, how about sending the more ordinary ones over to the Upheaval Alliance as well? Yizichin took advantage of the opportunity to circle around Jiang Yong and the others. "Brother Yi, why do you need so many low-level elites? You should know this, right? If a faction really wants to stand firm in the God Realm, the true deciding factor is the higher-ups." As soon as Jiang Yong opened his mouth, he saw the Yao servants of the Yao Ceiling Pagoda below, as well as the fearsome supervisors. That's right. Their family clans had been around for generations, and they'd long since had enough low-level elites. That's why they felt that having too many low-level elites was a burden. But Yizichin was different. His Upheaval Alliance had just been established, and what it lacked the most was manpower. Furthermore, there were dozens of terrifying auras below. Did he really lack top-notch experts? When other factions were established, they lacked top-notch experts. Yizichin was the complete opposite. He lacked low-level elites. The group of students in the club had followed them for a period of time, but there were very few who could actually graduate and enter their families. As for those who couldn't enter their families, They wanted to help, but they couldn't do anything about it. Since Yi Zichen needed them, what reason did they have to refuse? No problem. The Aspiration Society can send you talented graduates, but you know diviners. Haha, Jiang Yong grinned. So can the navigators. So can the Proud Sky Society. Murong Shui hesitated for a moment. The Appearance Association is made up of girls. I'll set up a women's department for them. Yi Zichen thumped his chest. Then there's no problem. All of Skyspan's major organizations agreed to help Yi Zichen with low-level elites. In total, they represented over 40% of Skyspan students. Yi Zichen saw a problem through them. In truth, most of Skyspan's student societies were formed to recruit elites for their families. Most of the ordinary students had to be abandoned. Yi Zichen could negotiate with the other society heads and form a partnership. Given his current status, the other society heads wouldn't go against his wishes. Then, if he did his best to educate the students, the Upheaval Alliance would definitely reach new heights in a short period of time. Then he could expand to the other Divine Mountains. He trusted that the other Divine Mountains were in similar circumstances. It would be great if he could get in touch with their academies. However, he didn't know anyone from the other Divine Mountains. Lu Jing. Yi Zichen suddenly thought of her. She was from the Eastern Divine Mountains Four Directions Academy. She might be able to help him. Coincidentally, they hadn't talked in a long time. He could use this opportunity to reconnect. As he considered this, Yi Zichen used his divine sense to send a message through a jade slip. After sending the message, Yi Zichen was in an incomparably good mood. He'd solved the Upheaval Alliance's manpower problem in such a short time. How could he not be delighted? Yi Zichen's eyes lit up with delight. Then he turned to Jiang Wei. Ever since he'd arrived, his expression had been strange, and his brows were deeply furrowed. Chapter 1390. A successful deception. Jiang Wei's frown had been there from the start. Yi Zichen had noticed it earlier, but he'd been busy introducing them to the Upheaval Alliance and discussing the transfer of members. As a result, he hadn't had the time to talk about it. Now that he'd entered a period of free time, he'd just casually asked. However, what he didn't notice was that when he mentioned Jiang Wei, the faces of the others, who'd just been chatting cheerfully with him, suddenly changed. They instinctively glanced in Jiang Wei's direction. Murong Shui bit her lip and clenched her fists. It's nothing. For some reason, Jiang Wei paused for a moment. Yi Zichen couldn't help but be astonished. As far as he could remember, this man, who'd been bestowed the title of Sword Immortal, had always been cold, arrogant, and intimidating. Why had he paused for a moment? Yi Zichen glanced at the others. Although they'd hidden it well, he could still sense that something was off about them, especially Murong Shui. He was nervous. As soon as Jiang Wei arrived, Yi Zichen had sensed something strange. He could understand why Jiang Yong and the others had come to visit, but Jiang Wei was the type of person who didn't care about anything else. Would he be curious enough to come visit? Was that even possible? No matter how big Yi Zichen's Upheaval Alliance was, it had nothing to do with him. All he wanted to do was immerse himself in the Tao of the Sword. And yet, not only had Jiang Wei come, his behavior was so strange that it was hard to ignore him. You didn't just come to see the Upheaval Alliance, did you? Asked Yi Zichen after a moment's hesitation. Pang Zheng and the others instinctively averted their gazes. Jiang Yong grinned, clenched his fists, and laughed. Brother Yi, you really are meticulous. In truth, we did come here to discuss something else with you. Then just say it. What's there to be secretive about? You even invited Brother Jiang over. From the looks of it, he's definitely unwilling, laughed Yi Zichen. We're here because of what happened at the tavern, said Jiang Yong. Yi Zichen was puzzled. What happened at the tavern was long over. Although he'd found them strange, they'd started chatting on the spot. A few days ago, he'd personally asked Xianji and learned that anti-upheaval was fine. The only thing he didn't understand was why Shui Imo hadn't responded to his messages. After a moment of silence, Jiang Yong finally said, "We lied to you that day." What do you mean? Yi Zichen frowned. All of them looked at Jiang Wei. Yi Zichen looked over suspiciously. Obviously, there was a trace of struggle in Jiang Wei's eyes, and the rusted sword in his arms trembled slightly. After a while, he calmed himself down and said with a sigh, "In truth, your anti-upheaval society wasn't eliminated. You just went to a secret realm along the way." Arcana land? Yes, the arcane realm. Jiang Wei nodded affirmatively. Anti-upheaval discovered the secret territory during the Battle of Geniuses. Shui Mo decided that it was a great opportunity for them, so she withdrew from the competition and brought anti-upheaval with her. However, you also know that the Arcana realm is unknown, and the unknown has a certain degree of danger. Then, Yi Zichen's expression darkened. Danger? Could it be that Shui Mo and the others encountered some sort of mishap? But if that was the case, why did Xianji tell him that anti-upheaval's members were all good people? Could she have lied to him too? These were just Yi Zichen's guesses. He'd have to wait for Jiang Wei to tell him the truth. Before leaving, Shui Mo said she didn't want you to worry, so she told Jiang Yong and the others to keep it a secret from you. But you also know that I don't like to lie to others, so I didn't participate. Besides, I thought they were enough on their own, which is why I wasn't there that day. Jiang Yong and the others lied to you too, but I heard them say that their acting was a bit over the top, which aroused your suspicions. You just happened to mention elimination, so they agreed. Then why are you telling me now? Asked Yi Zichen. It's a coincidence. Jiang Wei frowned. You also know that Shui Mo had to tell Great Emperor Shui Yang about her trip to the secret territory. Right after the tavern lied to you, Jiang Yong and the others received news of the Sea of Innocence's arrival. What news? Great Emperor Shui Yang and the Wish God personally performed divinations and determined that the secret territory would be a daunting experience for Shui Mo and the others. When Jiang Yong and the others heard this, they sighed in relief. They also felt bad for lying to you, so they shamelessly asked me to tell you all this. So that's what happened. When Yi Zichen heard this, he relaxed and let out a long sigh. Just now, when Jiang Wei told him all this, he suspected that Xianji had lied to him. Now, it sounded like Anti-Upheaval's brothers had simply found a place of good fortune. This secret territory was full of unknown factors, and they didn't want him to worry, so they lied to him. Earlier, Xianji had said that Anti-Upheaval's members were good people. She must have divined their situation in the secret territory as well. He knew it. How could Xianji lie to him? No wonder Shui Mo didn't reply to all my messages. So she ran off to the secret territory. By now, Yi Zichen finally understood why Shui Mo hadn't replied. The secret territory was definitely isolated from the outside world, so there was naturally no way to send messages. It was just like cell phone reception. Back in the basement, it was easy to lose signal. Yi Zichen's suspicions were finally resolved, and he smiled in relief. Why didn't you guys go? Shui Mo was the one who discovered the secret territory. How could we just go? Laughed Jiang Yong. Is there anything you'd be embarrassed about? Yi Zichen laughed teasingly, then patted Jiang Yong on the shoulder and shook his head. Old Jiang, I can tell that you're pretty smart. You knew I'd trust you, so you went to Jiang Wei and told me. What? Are you saying you won't believe me if I tell you? Jiang Yong glared at him. I can't say for sure. Yi Zichen said, half-jokingly. Brother Jiang, it seems you don't have much faith in Brother Yi. The Su brothers also joked about Jiang Yong. For a moment, everyone laughed at Jiang Yong's lack of faith, but they didn't notice that Murong Shui and Jiang Wei glanced at each other. Murong Shui's gaze was filled with gratitude, while Jiang Wei's expression seemed conflicted, but he also relaxed. Yi Zichen's suspicions were all resolved, and when he thought about how these societies were sending people over, he felt like today was his lucky day. After strolling around the Upheaval Alliance for a while longer, Yi Zichen's jade slip flashed. He took it out and probed it with his divine sense. To his surprise, it was Lu Jing's reply. It wasn't a transmission reply, but a question mark written on a piece of paper. Sundara. When he saw the question mark, Yi Zichen couldn't help but shake his head. Cutie, what are you doing? Yi Zichen felt goosebumps rise all over his body. However, he still sent it over with an evil grin on his face. He could almost imagine the cold, aloof Lu Jing's expression when she heard this. He smiled and put the jade slip back into his pocket. Jiang Yong and the others had just managed to trick Yi Zichen, and when they saw his smile, they couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong, Brother Yi? Brother Yi, what's wrong? Why are you so happy?" "It's nothing." Yi Zichen waved them off and laughed. "You know Lu Jing, right? She's from the Four Directions Palace. I'm just sending her a message." Chapter 1391. Pulled out of their faction ever since Shui Mo was sent to the Sea of Innocence for treatment, the battle of geniuses had truly come to an end. However, the Yao and demons didn't agree to end the battle just like that, so none of their elites returned to their clans. They remained in Heavenly God City's Divine Martial Academy. However, they were grounded, and a seal had been placed around the academy, preventing its members from communicating with the outside world. This was a joint decision between Great Emperor Shui Yang and the God Emperor's estate. No one could oppose it. However, that didn't mean everyone who'd come to the Battle of Geniuses had to abide by this agreement. For example, representatives from the Divine Mountains, Holy Lands, Demon Clans, and Yao Clans had all left Divine Martial Academy without incident. They hadn't been grounded. Lu Jing was one of these special people. She knew about what happened that day. Murong Shui, the society head who'd come to deceive Yi Zichen, revealed a grave expression. Jiang Wei and Murong Shui, in particular, were the most obvious. Yi Zichen noticed the change in their expressions. He looked at Jiang Wei and the others in bewilderment, then arched his brows. "What's going on with you guys?" "I didn't realize you knew Her Highness Lu Jing," said Pang Zheng with an embarrassed smile. "Shouldn't you all know?" Yi Zichen arched his brows. That day, when Big Sister Lu fought the demon's holy maiden, Lady Providence showed up and asked for her contact information. "You were all there, too. What's so strange about that?" "That's right. I almost forgot." Dilong forced a smile. No matter how much they thought about it, they'd forgotten that Yi Zichen and Lu Jing knew each other. Furthermore, they'd exchanged contact information. "While I was talking to you, I came up with an idea. I want to contact her and see if I could recruit some people from Four Directions Academy." Yi Zichen laughed in embarrassment. In truth, the Aspiration Society, the Navigators, the Appearance Association, the Grizzly Bears, and Proud Heavens Academies had already sent enough people. However, whether it was the Shao family or the factions the God Emperor had raised, they each had an ocean's worth of clansmen. With the outsider's support, Yi Zichen had more than enough resources to nurture talented people. He naturally wanted more people. This was to bolster his own courage. Compared to the Shao family or other first-rate family clans, the Upheaval Alliance was like comparing a child to an adult. However, when a number of people was large enough, it was like a group of children facing an adult. At that time, the fear in their hearts would be greatly reduced. Yi Zichen was just like that. He wanted to use the sheer number of people to reassure himself. Even with the support of the Aspirations Guild and the other guilds, he had still contacted Lu Qing to coax some people from the Four Directions Guild over. It was indeed a little too greedy. All right. Jiang Yong and the others smiled sheepishly, but the nervousness in their eyes was obvious. Murong Shui and Jiang Wei's foreheads were covered in a thin layer of sweat. Murong Shui was worried that the truth would be exposed, and so was Jiang Wei. However, he was even more worried that his lie would be exposed not long after he'd spoken it out. That would hurt his pride and pride. What should we do now? Brother Yi has contacted Lu Jing. She won't tell us, right? Su Chao's divine sense transmission simultaneously appeared in the sea of consciousness of all the presidents. I don't think so. Great Emperor Shui Yang personally said that we couldn't tell anyone. Her Highness Lu Jing probably wouldn't go against his will. However, nothing is absolute in this world. We still need to come up with a plan, said Jiang Yang. Does anyone have a way to contact Lu Jing? Asked Dilong. We definitely don't, but Bebe should. Even if she doesn't, the people of the Sea of Innocence must have a way to contact the Four Directions Palace, said Jiang Yang's divine sense. Schwerer, contact Bebe. Tell her we can't keep this a secret any longer. Tell her to think of a way. Yi Zichen scratched his head and glanced at Jiang Wei and the others. As soon as they mentioned Lu Jing, their expressions became indescribably strange. Yi Zichen reached into his robes. He still hadn't received a reply. Little did he know, while he was reading the jade slip, Morong Shue had already sent a message to Shue Bei, who was in the northern Divine Mountains Sea of Innocence. The Sea of Innocence. As its name suggested, the northern Divine Mountains Holy Land, the Sea of Innocence, was an ocean. A palace sat in its center. This was the residence of the Sea of Innocence's Shue family. The atmosphere inside and outside of the Shue family was solemn. All of this was because the Sea of Innocence's second princess's fate was unknown. Shue Mo lay on a bed in a luxurious room. Her face was pale, and her lips and eyes were a deep purple. There was even a purplish-red line running down her forearm. She was no longer breathing, and her soul was on the verge of collapsing. An old man with a mustache sat in front of Shue Mo's bed. From time to time, he checked Shue Mo's eyes and checked her pulse. In the end, he sighed and shook his head, then tapped 9 of her acupuncture points. Hermit Emperor Mo. The Hermit Emperor. He was the most famous doctor of the god race. However, 10,000 years ago, he'd lived in seclusion on the western Divine Mountain. Rumor had it that he'd tried to treat the 5 Elements Great Emperor, but no matter how powerful he was, he couldn't save the 5 Elements Great Emperor. After the 5 Elements Great Emperor's death was announced, he went into seclusion and founded the Hermit Palace. With the Hermit Emperor in charge of the Hermit Palace, more than 90% of the god race's doctors were subordinates. It was similar to the Southwest Divine Mountains Supreme Hall, which was staffed by Formation Masters. The Southeast Divine Mountains Great Void Temple was staffed by Artificers. The Northwest Divine Mountains Jade Lake was staffed by Pill Refiners. Each of these forces had an existence with absolute rallying power in this domain. However, unlike the other factions, the Hermit Emperor wasn't the leader of the other factions. He was still active within the god race, and had secluded himself from worldly affairs. The fact that Shui Yang had invited him here meant that he had a lot of face. As for the one who'd spoken just now, it was a beautiful woman who bore a striking resemblance to Shui Mo. Compared to Shui Mo, she was a bit more mature. However, her pretty face was filled with undisguisable worry. The Hermit Emperor glanced at the people in the room. The people standing in this room were all people who could topple the entire god race with a single stomp of their feet. Did their presence here represent the future of the god race? That cold, arrogant man in purple robes must be Bayan from the Four Directions Palace, right? That woman with the wise look in her eyes must be the profound pavilion's Xianji. And the woman he was talking to right now must be Shui Yang's ex-wife. Judging from the mark on her sleeve, was she the one who founded the Jade Lake? That old geezer from the Great Void Temple told me about it before I came. And then there's the one I only saw briefly on the way here. She looks like Su Qingyan, the Empress of the Foxes. Are they already trying to form a faction? The Hermit Emperor muttered to himself. Finally, he glanced at Shui Mo on the bed. He'd lived in seclusion for 10,000 years and no longer cared about the god race's future. The only thing that made him sigh was that, after 10,000 years of seclusion, he'd failed yet again. Did they want me to go into seclusion again? I pity this child. Who was it that injured her? How could they be so ruthless? Could it be that the assailant wanted to use this method to bring the god race's future to the surface? If that's what they wanted, they'd succeeded. But the child had suffered. He sighed inwardly, then met the woman's expectant gaze. The Hermit Emperor gently covered Shui Mo with the blanket. Chapter 1392. The Great Lie to Protect the Star-Lord Bang. Waiting for the Hermit Emperor's answer, the beautiful woman seemed to lose all her strength. She stumbled back several steps, shattering the vases in the room. Be careful. Xianji reached out and used her divine power to stop him. The woman smiled bitterly and struggled free of Xianji's grip. Then, she turned around and lunged at Shui Yang like a madwoman. The people in the room quickly stopped him. The beautiful woman also roared with red eyes. Shui Yang. From start to finish, Shui Yang's face remained expressionless. Even when he saw the Hermit Emperor shake his head and Shui Mo's soul about to collapse, he didn't show any emotion. The other people in the room were also silent. In the quiet bedroom, only the beautiful woman's laughter could be heard. Back then, I wanted to take Mo away, but you didn't let me. You knew that the Battle of Geniuses was a trap, but I didn't want him to go. But you still didn't. He went. And what was the result? Tell me, what's the result? The woman's hysterical cries drew everyone's attention. Xianji silently lowered her head and looked at Shui Mo, who was lying on the bed, a look of pity in her eyes. However, Shui Yang's face remained expressionless. He just stood there tall and straight. I'm going to kill that brat. Zhao Qianhe had been standing by Shui Mo's bedside the entire time. She gritted her teeth and was about to leave when Shui Yang stopped her. Get out of the way, Zhao Qianhe shouted with a dark expression. We can't go. If we do, we'll fall right into Zhou Wu's trap, said Shui Yang. That's your problem. What can he do to me? If worst comes to worst, I'll just return to the first era and kill the person who injured little Mo. Zhao Qianhe snorted nonchalantly. No, replied Shui Yang coldly. The tension in the room reached a boiling point. Just then, Shui Beibei ran in, a jade slip glowing red in her hand. Father. Shui Beibei had just entered the room, so she wasn't sure what was going on. When she saw Beibei enter, Zhao Qianhe thought for a moment, then retreated to the side. There were some things that he couldn't let Beibei know. She was still too young. Although Shui Beibei was young, she could still sense the strangeness in the room. She blinked at Zhao Qianhe, then glanced at the beautiful woman, who was doing her best to suppress her emotions. She looked very much like Shui Mo. Annie Ling, what's wrong? The woman called Annie Ling feigned a smile. Shui Beibei's pupils constricted. Annie Ling, silly child, don't think too much. Your big sister, Mo is fine. Look, Grandpa Hermit Emperor is here. Your big sister Mo will wake up soon. Zhao Qianhe gently patted her little head and said, Did you come here because you have something to say? Then hurry up and say it. Grandpa Hermit Emperor still has to heal your sister. You can't stay here for too long. The Emperor Shui's heart, Shui ecstasy. He didn't know how bad Shui Mo's condition was. The way she saw it, she was furious that Shui Mo was injured, but she trusted that Shui Yang and the others would heal her. Once Shui Mo woke up, the two of them could take revenge on that bastard. Yin. Shui. She didn't want to delay Shui Mo's treatment, so she handed the jade slip to Shui Yang. Big Sister Morong said that Yi Zichen found Lu Jing from the Four-Direction Palace. They're worried that the matter will be exposed, so they told us to contact the Four-Direction Palace. Got it, said Shui Yang. Then hurry up and treat my second sister. With that, Shui Beibei ran out of the room. Shui Yang glanced at Baiyan, who nodded in response. Got it, I'll tell Lu Jing. What's so special about Yi Zichen? Why are you so protective of him? Zhao Qianhe stared intently at Shui Yang and Baiyan. She had interacted with Yi Zichen a few times before, but he hadn't left a good impression on her. But ever since this guy entered her line of sight, no matter what happened after that, his shadow would always appear. What was even more incomprehensible was that when Shui Mo was injured, Shui Yang's first decision wasn't to heal her. It was to prevent Yi Zichen from finding out. The other forces all agreed, including her sister, the woman Beibei called Aunt Ling. He might be the third era's master of the stars, said Shui Yang. The others didn't seem too surprised. It was obvious that they'd known all this already. When she heard this, Zhao Qianhe's eyes widened. He's the master of the stars? Most likely, said Xianji. You people from the first era have already interacted with him. Given their relationship, it's highly likely he's the master of the stars. You came from the first era, so you know full well how important the master of the stars is. We naturally have to ensure his safety. Does Zhou know? He doesn't. Bai narrowed his eyes and snorted. If he did, he'd have killed Yi Zichen and taken his celestial fate long ago. This isn't the first time he's done this. That Bai family brat made a move on Shui Yang's second daughter, but that was just a test. He wanted to test Zhou Wu's patience, as well as our personal relationship. Zhao Qianhe gradually fell silent. If Yi Zichen was the master of the stars, then they really did have to ensure his safety. No wonder her sister hadn't done anything out of line, even though she'd been furious. She knew. They couldn't let Yi Zichen find out. Although Zhao Qianhe hadn't interacted much with him, no matter how bad her reputation was, she couldn't deny that he was a loyal and righteous child who didn't care about the consequences of his actions. If he rushed over and Zhou Wu caught wind of the Emperor's star's whereabouts. But we can't just keep hiding it like this. We have to hide it for as long as we can. Even if we have to lie to the heavens, we have to keep it under wraps, said Shui Yong solemnly. Then little Mo, let's just say she blocked a calamity for the Emperor's star. The others in the room were indifferent once more. Blocked a calamity for the Emperor's star? Under the circumstances, this was the easiest way to explain it. It was also the most comforting explanation they could come up with. But why? It was little Mo blocking a calamity. Zhao Qin's lips quivered. In the end, all she could do was walk over to Shui Mo's bedside and clutch her hand tightly. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Xianji looked out the window in silence. Annie Ling sat on the floor, covering her face and crying bitterly. Shui Yang and Bian looked at each other. Their expressions were cold, but their eyes were filled with sorrow. Especially Shui Yang. That was his daughter. How could he not care? But things had already gotten to this point. What else could he do? Just now, you were talking about the Master of the Stars, weren't you? At that moment, the Hermit Emperor, who'd been completely ignored, suddenly spoke up. Everyone in the room looked up at the Hermit Emperor and heard him say, "You're right." Chapter 1393. Never would have thought Lu Jing would have been annoyed. Just now, she'd received a message from that annoying bastard. His corny divine sense made her feel incredibly uncomfortable. Whenever she thought of his oily tone, she couldn't help but tremble like she was suffering from malaria. She didn't want to have any more contact with this shameless bastard, especially that girl who followed him around all the time. She didn't even know if she was dead or alive, yet he was still in the mood to talk to her like that. That annoying bastard was irresponsible. She tossed the jade slip into a corner of her room, then fished out a cell phone from her pocket. She'd obtained it by chance a few days ago. She clutched it like a precious treasure, blushing as she curiously clicked on a half-finished anime. She didn't know why, but the content was so filthy. Given her personality, she should have hated it. But she couldn't help herself. It was like her subconscious was urging her to keep watching. Ugh! Lu Jing lay on the bed, flipping through page after page. Her face was flushed, and she covered her face from time to time, leaving a tiny gap between her fingers. Her eyes brimmed with curiosity as she continued to flip through the pages. The jade slip she'd tossed into the corner flashed with red light. That annoying bastard really was persistent. Lu Jing glared at the jade slip in the corner, but didn't look at the messages inside. The way she saw it, the content of that annoying bastard's messages was definitely disgusting. Lu Jing, who'd been lost in her fantasy world, was frightened out of her wits. She covered her phone with a pillow, then sat on the bed like a frightened ostrich. "Why, Your Majesty? What are you doing? You didn't even reply to my messages." The one who'd messaged Lu Jing with his divine sense was none other than Bian from the northern divine mountain Sea of Innocence. Ever since Schweb Bebe's arrival, he'd been trying to get in touch with Lu Jing. However, every time he sent a message through a jade slip, Lu Jing assumed it was from that annoying bastard. So she ignored him. Bian had no choice but to reach out with his divine sense and get in touch with Lu Jing. "Were you the one who sent that message just now? I thought it was from that annoying," Lu Jing said to herself, but halfway through, she quickly covered her mouth with her hand. She knew that it was a derogatory term for Yi Zichen, but if she said it to others, it might cause a misunderstanding. Lu Jing didn't linger on this matter and asked, "Do you have anything to tell me? I heard that person called Yi Zichen contacted you, right?" "Yes. He doesn't know that Shui Mo was injured by the Bai family, and we don't want him to know either. When you talk to him, don't mention it. If he asks about you, tell him Shui Mo and the others went to a hidden realm. It's fine if I don't reply to him." When Lu Jing gave such a reply, Lao AI was silent for a long time. "This is indeed a way, but I still hope that you can interact with him more. You should be able to understand what I mean. I still have some matters to take care of in the Sea of Innocence. If anything happens to the Four Directions Palace, contact me at any time." As soon as his voice fell, Bian unilaterally cut off the communication between their divine senses. Even if Lu Jing wanted to reply, she couldn't. Her cultivation wasn't as high as Bian's. He couldn't extend his divine sense from the Sea of Innocence to the Four Directions Palace. Lu Jing pursed her lips and bit her lip, then glanced at the jade slip she'd tossed into the corner. Contact Amor? Lu Jing's heart was filled with reluctance, but she still picked up the jade slip. She probed it with her divine sense. Yizichen's corny message was still there. As soon as she heard it, she couldn't help but tremble. You guys are really strange. Yizichen cocked his head and looked at the other society heads' expressions. Their reactions were far too abnormal. He couldn't help but think too much about it. At that moment, the jade slip in his pocket lit up. Yizichen took out the jade tablet and received Lu Qing's icy reply. What? It seemed that after losing her memories, Lu Jing didn't like this sort of corny tone. Yizichen muttered to himself, then replied, I'm just chatting with you. Can't I? While he was replying to Lu Qing, the other guild leaders were also conversing with each other. How'd it go? Asked the Su brothers. Bei Bei said she already told Great Emperor Shuiyang. I'm sure the Four Directions Palace will do their best to cooperate with us, said Murong Shui. That's good. Everyone let out long sighs, and the tension on their faces gradually dissipated. As soon as Yizichen sent the message, he turned around and saw that their expressions had changed yet again. You guys, are you all right? Brother Yi, what could possibly happen to us? Jiang Yong laughed heartily. We've already seen everything we wanted to see. We still have other things to do, so we won't disturb you any longer. You're leaving just like that? I was planning on having a meal with you guys, said Yizichen. No, we have other matters to attend to. We need time to send you talented people, Brother Yi. When it came to sending them talented people, Yizichen didn't try to keep them any longer. Then hurry up and get back to work. Come back when you have time. The society heads left the Upheaval Alliance's headquarters. As he watched them leave, Yizichen couldn't help but frown. These people, they'd come out of nowhere, and they'd left out of the blue as well. We're leaving just like that? Dilong furrowed his brows. If we stay any longer, we'll have even more openings, said Pang Zheng. The others nodded. They'd already finished what they needed to do. What Lu Jing said wasn't something they could control. However, Great Emperor Shuiyang would definitely contact the Four Directions Palace, so there shouldn't be any problems. There was no need for them to stay any longer. Bang! At that moment, they suddenly bumped into a black-robed man on the side of the road. They hurriedly apologized, but the man didn't seem to mind. He simply nodded at them and left. The others didn't take it to heart, either. As they walked, they chatted about how much longer they were going to keep this a secret. Suddenly, Murong Shui stopped in her tracks. She frowned and looked behind her. What is it? Don't you think that person we bumped into looked a little familiar? Murong Shui furrowed her brows. Familiar? Jiang Yong arched his brows. He really hadn't paid much attention to that person's face. To his surprise, Jiang Wei, who'd been silent this entire time, suddenly turned around and rushed in that direction. Just as the others were wondering what he'd done, they heard Murong Shui say, That person looks like the demon's holy maiden. That person seems to be the demon's holy maiden. The direction she's heading in, the Upheaval Alliance. The society heads reacted. They glanced at each other, then roared. Chapter 1394. Exposed, why had the holy maiden suddenly appeared here? Shouldn't she have returned to the demons by now? Murong Shui and the others all wondered the same thing. But for the holy maiden to suddenly appear in the vicinity of the Upheaval Alliance, they were certain. She was definitely going to find Yizichen. The other races of the God Realm might not want internal strife, but the demons, they've been waiting for this opportunity. They planned everything. Whether it was Xianji or Shuiyang, they'd done everything they could. In order to keep Yizichen in the dark, they colluded with multiple factions and lied to him. They'd never have guessed that the Holy Maiden would appear at a time like this. Shui, hurry up and contact Bei Bei. Tell her what's going on. We're going to stop the Holy Maiden. Whether or not we can stop her, we have to let Great Emperor Shuiyang know. Understood. Murong Shui stayed behind and started contacting Shui Bei Bei. Jiang Yong and the others sped off as fast as they could. They had to stop the Holy Maiden before she reached the Upheaval Alliance. Little did they know, just as they sensed something strange, the black-robed man they'd met earlier chuckled. It seems we'll have to hurry. Yi Zichen watched Jiang Yong and the others leave, then returned to the reception hall. To his disbelief, Lu Jing's tone had clearly been filled with impatience. Yet, she'd forced herself to use that impatient tone to chat with him for almost an hour. Yi Zichen could be said to be overly suspicious. Even in his conversation with Lu Jing, he'd mentioned anti-upheaval. The results were more or less the same. They'd all gone to a secret realm, and Yi Zichen felt a bit more at ease. They all came to the same conclusion. Only then did Yi Zichen feel a bit more at ease. Jiang Yong and the others were acting too strangely, which was why he had no choice but to seek confirmation from them. When he felt they'd had enough, Yi Zichen was just about to talk to Lu Jing about sending more people. "Ah, we meet again." A chuckle suddenly rang out in the hall. When he looked up, he saw that the black-robed holy maiden had already taken off her hat. Her purple eyes were smiling. A few Upheaval Alliance members chased after her. When Yi Zichen saw her, he frowned and placed the jade slip on the table, then waved at the pursuers. Yi Zichen spoke up after the members bowed and retreated. "What are you doing here? Don't tell me you're also here to visit." "Can I?" The holy maiden didn't hesitate at all. She sat down on a chair and smiled. "I came here in advance to familiarize myself with the situation. It'll be easier to deal with enemies in the future. Then that's even more reason not to show you around." "I'm truly sorry," said Yi Zichen. "You're really decisive. How could Sun Yige like someone like you? I really don't understand." The holy maiden couldn't help but shake her head. Then she smiled. "Actually, I was just joking with you. I'm a person of character, and the unknown is the most exciting thing to do. I'm not in the mood to test your strength. Besides, your small faction isn't enough for me to test your strength. Hey, do you have anything to drink? Give me some. I'm quite thirsty after such a long journey." He waved his hand and threw the wine on the table in front of the holy maiden. "If you're not afraid of death, then drink. What's there to be afraid of?" Without any hesitation, the holy maiden poured the wine into her mouth. She drank it warmly and carefully covered her mouth with her sleeves. She looked like a young lady from a noble family. When she returned the wine to the table, it was empty. Yi Zichen watched her vigilantly. From the moment he'd first met her, he knew she was no ordinary woman. It was hard to see through her motives, her thoughts, and her purpose in doing things. Now, all of a sudden, she'd run over to the Upheaval Alliance. "You don't need to worry about the battle of geniuses." The holy maiden covered her mouth and laughed. Her deep purple eyes were playful and pitiful. "It seems you really were kept in the dark. If I hadn't come, who knows how long you'd have been kept in the dark. What a pitiful little thing." He frowned. Yi Zichen frowned. "What do you mean? You're still talking about the battle of geniuses? Don't you know that it stopped half a month ago?" Laughed the holy maiden. "It stopped? Why? Why? Don't you know?" The holy maiden laughed, then came to a sudden realization. "That's right. You didn't even know that the battle of geniuses had stopped. How could you possibly know why? What exactly are you trying to say? Just say it," said Yi Zichen. "I'm afraid your heart won't be able to take it." The holy maiden chuckled, walked up to Yi Zichen, and whispered into his ear. "Shuelemo was almost beaten to death. Did you know about that?" Boom! Instantly, a violent aura burst forth from Yi Zichen's body. Yi Zichen's aura wreaked havoc throughout the entire reception area, causing the ground beneath his feet to crack under his weight. Yi Zichen forced himself to look away, then glared at the holy maiden. "I dare you to say that again. I told you there was no way you could accept it." The holy maiden giggled and retreated to the side. She ran her fingers through her hair, which Yi Zichen had messed up. "A few days ago, your anti-upheaval society's Shuelemo, the second princess of the Northern Divine Mountain Sea of Innocence, was almost beaten to death. Even now, we don't know if she's still alive or not. Shueyong and the Central Divine Mountain suppressed this matter. All participants are forbidden from leaving the Divine Martial Academy, and no one is allowed to leak this information. As for why they're doing this, I'm sure you know. They just don't want you to know. As for me, I just don't like seeing you kept in the dark. You look so sullen, as if the entire world is playing you. Little Sun likes you so much. How could I just watch you get tricked? In order to let you know the truth, I came all the way from the Julie to tell you. What do you think? Compared to them, I've treated you much better, haven't I? Is that so? Yi Zichen smiled indifferently, but beneath his silence, anyone could sense the towering rage hidden within. No wonder Jiang Yong and the others had acted so strangely. No wonder they tried to stop him from going to the Divine Martial Academy. They'd done all this to keep him in the dark, to keep it a secret. They'd gone so far as to lie to the heavens. Annie Xianji was involved, and so was the Four Directions Palace. Brother Yi. At that moment, Jiang Wei arrived at the Upheaval Alliance's headquarters. He'd been flying on his sword the entire time, so he was several times faster than Pang Zheng and the others. He hadn't seen a single holy maiden along the way, and he'd even wondered if they were seeing things. Regardless of whether he was seeing things or not, he made a beeline for the Upheaval Alliance's headquarters. Ignoring his fellow disciples' attempts to stop him, he headed straight for the Upheaval Alliance's guest room. He looked forward to not seeing even a shadow of the Holy Maiden. They'd been too nervous. Until he saw. The Holy Maiden stood by Yi Zichen's side with a faint smile. When Jiang Wei arrived, she even smiled back. Yi Zichen sat upright in his chair and looked at him coldly. His voice was so deep, it was suffocating. He spoke softly, as if he were passing judgment. Chapter 1395. Before the storm, the northern divine mountain, the Sea of Innocence. When the Hermit Emperor said that Shui Mo could still be saved, everyone in the room was shocked. Zhao Qianhe and Annie Ling were the most astonished. They stared fixedly at the Hermit Emperor, their eyes brimming with hope and anticipation. Even Shui Yang's emotionless eyes trembled slightly. I can't tell you right now. I have to meet the Master of the Stars first. I'll tell him myself. I'm gonna go capture him. Zhao Qianhe tugged at her sleeves and turned to leave, but Shui Yang stopped her. What are you doing now? Shui Yang didn't answer her question directly. Instead, he looked at the Hermit Emperor. How confident are you? I'm not sure. I read about this method in ancient texts, but I'll have to wait for the Master of the Stars to decide how to carry it out, said the Hermit Emperor calmly. Everyone fell silent once more. However, as time passed, Shui Yang, Xianji, and Bayan conversed with each other through their divine senses. In the blink of an eye, another 2 hours passed. Qianhe, go bring Yi Zichen here, said Shui Yang suddenly. Shui Yang suddenly said. Zhao Qianhe, who'd been waiting for a long time, nodded solemnly, then hurried out. However, just as she reached the door, she bumped into Shui Bei, who was rushing in as well. Shui Bei fell to the ground. She rubbed her sore nose, and tears welled up in her eyes. Ah, Bei. Shui Bei hurriedly helped Shui Yang up from the ground. Shui Bei was still rubbing her nose. Ignoring the pain, she ran over to Shui Yang. Dad, Big Sister Morong, said the demon's holy maiden went looking for Yi Zichen. What? Shouted Xianji. Bayan, who'd been leaning against the door, raised his brows. Annie Ling's pupils constricted as she held Shui Mo's hand. Shui Yang's brows furrowed. Even Zhao Qianhe, who'd been about to go looking for Yi Zichen, stopped in her tracks. Xianji, aren't you in charge of Heavenly God City now? How could demons appear in the city? And how could they find Yi Zichen? Shouted Shui Yang. I haven't received any news. Xianji frowned. The atmosphere in the room grew tense and heavy. The Holy Maiden had suddenly appeared, but not only had Xianji not heard anything about it, she'd even sent her to find Yi Zichen. Everyone present understood why she was looking for Yi Zichen. Is Heavenly God City managed by Xianji? I don't think so. Bayan, who was leaning against the door, smiled indifferently. Don't forget that Heavenly God City is ultimately Zhou Wu's territory. Zhou Wu. Shui Yang frowned. At this time, Xianji was also sending messages through jade slips to her subordinates. The jade slips flashed, and her expression grew darker and darker. She kept the jade slip and looked at the others in the room. My people have all been replaced. Right now, it's the Shun family's people who are controlling Heavenly God City. See, I was right. Bayan snorted. At this time, he was using the Shun family to replace Xianji's people. At this time, the few people in the room frowned deeply. It looks like Zhou will no longer trust you, Zhao Qianling said. Has he ever trusted me? Bayan was starting to talk a lot. He only trusts himself. Even the Shun, Bai, Yuchi, and Huangfu families, he's never truly trusted them. He's just that kind of selfish person. Dad, big sister Morong, is asking me again. What should we do? Shui Bei pouted. Shui Yong smiled bitterly, glanced at the others in the room, then cupped his fists at the Hermit Emperor. Hermit Emperor, please take care of my daughter for the time being. We have to personally make a trip to Heavenly God City. They were too late. Jiang Wei stood in front of the door. When he saw the Holy Maiden and Yi Zichen, his face ashen and seething with rage, he knew he'd been exposed. It was laughable. He'd known from the start that hiding things like this wasn't going to work. The better the concealment method, the longer the concealment method. If it was inferior, the shorter the concealment method. In any case, the truth couldn't be concealed. Lies would always be exposed one day. He'd never even considered participating in this monstrous lie. His pride and arrogance made it impossible for him to accept lying. However, in the end, he'd been persuaded by Jiang Yong. Even though he knew this was a quagmire, he'd resolutely jumped in. Not long ago, even though he'd perfectly played out the words Jiang Yong and the others had taught him, he hadn't been particularly excited. Instead, he'd felt even more suppressed. He'd been terrified, worried that his lie would be exposed. When he saw the Holy Maiden, his heart had been in his throat. He'd ignored Morong Shui and the others and gone off on his own. As he chased after the Holy Maiden, his nerves had been stretched to the limit. When he finally arrived at the Upheaval Alliance and saw the scene before him, he felt inexplicably relieved. His lie had been exposed. It had happened much sooner than he'd expected. However, now that he'd been exposed, he didn't need to worry about being exposed any longer. It was just ridiculous. Why had he been brainwashed by Jiang Yong and agreed to join their army of lies? Before long, he understood. He just didn't want to watch Yi Zichen walk to his death. That was all. Judging from Yi Zichen's current state of mind, he absolutely already knew about Xuanmo's injuries. With the Holy Maiden supporting him from behind the scenes, Jiang Wei alone wouldn't be able to stop Yi Zichen and prevent him from acting on impulse. I wonder how long it'll take Great Emperor Shui Yong to get here. As he pondered this, Jiang Wei silently spread out his divine sense. Before Shui Yong arrived, he had to do everything in his power to stop him. Brother Yi. At that moment, Jiang Yong and the others arrived right behind Jiang Wei. When they saw the Holy Maiden by Yi Zichen's side, their expressions changed despite themselves. You're all here. Yi Zichen's body was already enveloped in a layer of flames. Within the flames, they could faintly make out silver lightning. The temperature of the entire reception room was raised by the flames, and the crackling thunder behind him made everyone feel his monstrous anger. When she saw Jiang Wei and the others, as well as the Holy Maiden by Yi Zichen's side, her pretty eyes flashed. Then she walked up to Yi Zichen's side. The Holy Maiden tactfully retreated to the side. Zichen. Yi Zichen gently patted her hand to indicate that he was fine. Then he looked coldly at Jiang Wei and the others. Chapter 1396. Mixed emotions. Anyone could sense the fury in Yi Zichen's indifferent tone. That was for sure. He'd treated others with sincerity, yet he'd been played like a fiddle. If it was anyone else, it would be difficult for them to maintain a calm heart. Brother Yi, don't believe that witch's nonsense, shouted Pang Zheng. So you're saying Shui Mo and the others went to the secret realm, right? Yi Zichen smiled at Pang Zheng. The instant he nodded, Yi Zichen slammed the table beside him, shattering it. Even now, you're still trying to trick me? In an instant, countless Upheaval Alliance members gathered outside the hall. Pu Jingwan, Yang Jian, the great sage, and the others were among them. They stared in shock at the shattered table, then at the heavy atmosphere. They couldn't help but glance at each other. After exchanging a few glances, they silently walked in from the outside. They stood by Yi Zichen's side. In truth, Yi Zichen already knew what was going on. As soon as the Holy Maiden of the Nine Li told him about Xuanmo's injuries, he could tell whether she was telling the truth or Jiang Yong and the others. It wasn't that he wanted to believe the worst possible outcome, but that Jiang Yong and the others had been acting very unnatural. That unnaturalness had been imprinted in Yi Zichen's heart, making it impossible for him to trust anything they said. Pang Zheng and the others were terrified. Even Xiao Yumei couldn't help but frown. It had been 100 years since she'd last seen Yi Zichen, but she firmly believed that her understanding of him wouldn't diminish with time. He was furious, and his anger was unmistakable. She really wanted to know what they and that woman had said to make Yi Zichen go this far. "Brother Yi, I'm sorry," Jiang Wei said apologetically. "Jiang Wei, I never would have guessed you'd step into these muddy waters too," laughed Yi Zichen. "I didn't either. Given my personality, I wouldn't have bothered getting involved," said Jiang Wei with a bitter smile. "But as you can see, I got involved anyway." "Huh," Yi Zichen sneered. "We really did lie to you, but please believe me when I say we had good intentions," said Jiang Yong. "I don't want to hear any of this." Yi Zichen decisively interrupted Jiang Yong. "I want to know how Shui Mo is right now." In an instant, everyone fell silent. Wasn't this silence a form of response? Now it seemed that the Nine Li's holy maiden wasn't exaggerating at all when she said that Shui Mo was nearly beaten to death. It was true, and Shui Mo was still in critical condition. His life and death were unknown. For some reason, Yi Zichen thought back to everything he'd gone through with Shui Mo. Most likely, he'd joined anti-upheaval because Shui Mo had coerced him into it. At the time, his crystal card was in her hands. Afterwards, it was time to recruit new members for the society. In order to carry out Shui Mo's orders, he transformed into an excavator. At that point, the way Yi Zichen saw it, the woman was very sly and shameless. She'd tossed him the priceless 10,000-year black jade without so much as batting an eye. When they faced the subterranean beast, she'd used her body to block a fatal blow for him. In the end, she'd even laughed and scolded him. "Can't you be more serious? If you die, I'll be in deep trouble." Afterward, she'd completely disregarded her own injuries and left him a pill. Then, with her dagger in hand, she glared at Yi Zichen with her fiercest gaze. Then, there was her determination to save Murong Shui and Jiang Yong. When they were trapped in the sea of beasts, Yi Zichen took the initiative to stay behind and bring up the rear. Compared to being trapped in the sea of beasts, Shui Mo was far more anxious and desperate to find Yi Zichen. That was because he believed that Yi Zichen would definitely bring people to save him. In short, she was cunning and willful, like most girls, but also hot-blooded and responsible. Yi Zichen had long since viewed her as a brother. He'd even thought of pulling her over to be the deputy leader of the Upheaval Alliance once it was over. Then, he'd use his position as the leader to suppress her and get his revenge. Someone had almost beaten him to death. "Huh? Who did it? What's going on? Tell me." The crowd remained silent. The way Jiang Wei and the others saw it, all they could do was wait in silence. But they'd forgotten that Yi Zichen had the Nine Li's holy maiden by his side. Even if they didn't say anything, "I'll talk." To everyone's surprise, the one to speak up wasn't the holy maiden, but rather Murong Shui. Murong Shui's eyes were bloodshot. She'd truly been tormented these past few days. Now that Yi Zichen knew the truth of the matter, she felt sorry for not being able to keep Shui Mo's secret. However, a raging fire burned in her heart, the fire of vengeance. She'd watched helplessly as that person beat Shui Mo to the brink of death. She'd watched as that person grabbed Shui Mo by the head and threw her to the ground, his eyes filled with disdain. She hated herself for being so weak and powerless. She hated that she couldn't avenge Shui Mo herself. Her emotions had been so complicated. While she blamed herself, she'd hoped someone would be able to kill that bastard. Even now, that was the case. Before Yi Zichen found out, she'd done everything in her power to hide everything from Shui Mo. But now that he knew, what do you want to hear? I'll tell you everything. Everything. All right. Murong Shui didn't hesitate. Despite everyone else's objections, her eyes flashed with fury, and she clenched her fists. During the 4th round of the Battle of Geniuses, we were assigned to a secret realm. There's a great treasure in the mystic realm, a sword. Murong Shui didn't bother to disguise anything. She told them everything that had happened. The general gist of it was that whoever remained in the secret realm would get the sword. In the end, 3 people remained. 2 of them were Murong Shui and Shui Mo, while the third, his surname was Bai Yulong. At the time, Murong Shui was heavily injured. Shui Mo was worried about her safety, so she crushed the talisman for her. She and Bai Yulong entered the finals. Prior to the finals, Bai Yulong had never revealed any of his true strength. Practically no one paid him any attention. Shui Mo and the others even wondered how he'd made it to the finals. But in the finals, he'd shown everyone what it meant to be overwhelmed by fear. The finals lasted 10 minutes, and the 2 of them had only fought for 5. Or perhaps it was more accurate to say that Shui Mo had been one-sidedly crushed. 5 minutes. Shui Mo even activated the power of her bloodline, but she'd still been beaten black and blue. She tried to crush the talisman several times, but Bai Yulong restrained her every time. He wouldn't let her withdraw. He left Shui Mo. Chapter 1397. The holy demon body reappeared. In the end, Lady Xianji personally stepped in to stop the competition. I'll never forget how arrogant he was, how he grabbed Mo's head, then slammed her to the ground. The condescending, disdainful look in his eyes. I'll never forget how he used every method at his disposal to torment Mo. I want to avenge Mo, but I'm not strong enough. Yi Zichen, if you can avenge Mo, kill that Bai Yulong yourself. I, Murong Shui, am willing to serve you for the rest of my life. I'm willing. Murong Shui knelt on the ground, tears streaming down her face. Even Jiang Yong and the others, who'd wanted to stop her, gritted their teeth and turned their heads away when they heard what she'd said. They didn't say a single word. They'd seen it with their own eyes. They'd watched the divine martial tournament screen of light. At that time, their hearts were burning with monstrous anger. They all wanted to kill Bai Yulong to vent their hatred. However, when they thought of the vast gap in cultivation between them, they forcefully swallowed their resentment. They clenched their fists and glared resentfully at Yi Zichen's arrogant eyes. If they were strong enough, they wouldn't be able to completely suppress Bai Yulong. Even if they were as strong as him, they wouldn't hesitate to disregard the rules of the Battle of Geniuses and fight him to the death. Enough. Yi Zichen coldly cut her off, his anger rising. She'd said so much, but Yi Zichen only heard a few words. Disdain. Torture. At the end of the day, Bai Yulong had only tortured Shui Mo. He hadn't taken her life because he disdained her. When Shui Mo activated her bloodline power, there was no way he didn't know she was a member of the Shui family. But he'd done it anyway. It was obvious he'd done it on purpose. Furthermore, his torture showed that he wasn't afraid of the Shui family at all, so long as he closed his eyes. He recalled how Bai Yulong had tortured Shui Mo in the secret realm. She'd begged for death, but she couldn't. Ha! Ha ha ha! Yi Zichen covered his face, his veins bulging. Through the slits between his fingers, he could see his pitch-black eyes, which radiated a devilish smile. What a Bai Yulong! What a disdain! The aura around his body became extremely turbid, and the surrounding space seemed to be distorted. A purplish red, steam-like aura gushed out from his pores. Vaguely, the shadow of a demon appeared behind him. His back also seemed to grow flesh wings that protruded outwards. His pupils turned purple, emitting a terrifying purple glow. Everyone in the room was shocked by Yi Zichen's change, especially Xiao Yume, who stood beside him. This was the aura of a demon. Only the Holy Virgin of the Juli tribe, who was not far away, raised her eyebrows and smiled gently. In the blink of an eye, a room large enough to hold dozens of people was filled with reddish-purple steam. Jiang Yong and the others shuddered at the sight of those devilish eyes. Brother Yi, Jiang Yong gulped, suppressed his trembling heart, and looked Yi Zichen in the eye. Don't be rash. Shui Mo is heavily injured, but she's not dead yet. Great Emperor Shui Yang has already taken her to the Sea of Innocence for treatment. Given the Great Emperor's abilities, it's only a matter of time before she recovers. Brother Yi, don't be rash. Whether it's Bai Yulong or the Bai family backing him, you can't handle them right now, said Su Chao. Where there's life, there's hope. You've only been on the Divine Mountains for a few years, yet you're already a half-step diviner. So long as you have enough time, we'll definitely get our revenge. Skyspan Student Society leaders couldn't help but try to comfort him, but no matter what they said, Yi Zichen didn't respond at all. Jiang Wei, hurry up and tell Brother Yi that by Yulong. Brother Yi, go ahead. I support you. To everyone's surprise, Jiang Wei didn't try to dissuade Yi Zichen at all. Instead, his gaze was utterly earnest. As you are, you might really be able to fight him. How come you? Pang Zheng and the others pointed at Jiang Wei, speechless. Then they looked at Murong Shui. They were clearly the ones that didn't want Yi Zichen's lie to be exposed the most. But now that it was exposed, they were the ones so supportive and certain of Yi Zichen's revenge. Are you all crazy? Don't you know what Bai Yulong's cultivation is? Jiang Yong was furious. No matter how much Jiang Yong cursed, Jiang Wei and Murong Shui looked at Yi Zichen with certainty. Murong Shui simply wanted to get revenge for Shui Mo. Jiang Wei, on the other hand, had already considered the situation. Although he didn't want to believe Yi Zichen, he had no choice but to admit Yi Zichen could fight Bai Yulong. As a fellow swordsman, he was keenly aware of the importance of an enlightened sword heart. Wherever the sword pointed, the heart pointed. Since Yi Zichen had already made up his mind, there was no point in trying to stop him. He might as well let Yi Zichen do as he pleased. The only thing that left Jiang Wei exasperated was that he'd never guessed the gap between him and Yi Zichen would be so vast. But that didn't matter. He'd catch up eventually. Yi Zichen covered his face and laughed. His hysterical laughter made the onlookers' scalps tingle involuntarily. His aura grew stronger and stronger, and the wings on his back were on the verge of bursting out of his skin. Until, boom, a wave of wind swept through the room. A violent gust of wind swept through the room, sending the tables and chairs flying everywhere. Even Jiang Yong and the others in front of the door couldn't open their eyes from the howling winds. They frantically set up seals around themselves and split apart the purplish-red waves of wind. Only then did they see wings. 6 pairs of black and white wings, 12 in total, flapped to and fro on Yi Zichen's back. The howling winds were coming from them. Then they looked at Yi Zichen and judged from his aura. A diviner. He was a demon. Long time no see. Yi Zichen had already removed his hand from covering his face. His words were directed at the wings on his back. He'd almost forgotten. He had a holy demon body. He smiled indifferently, spread his palms, and sensed the changes in his body. Was this what a diviner was like? It was as if he'd become one with heaven and earth. The Tao of all creation was like a fish in water. No wonder only diviners could truly be considered experts of their own. The wings on his back unfurled. They were more than 2 meters long and took up a lot of space. He slowly walked up to Murong Shui, who knelt on the ground, and reached out. Yi Zichen's body emanated thick, demonic energy. However, as his aura enveloped her, she sensed a purity that could cleanse her soul. Half was unbearably filthy, while the other half was pure and holy. 2 completely incompatible auras appeared on Yi Zichen's body at the same time. Murong Shui was shocked, but she pursed her lips and reached out her hand. Who cared so much? As long as she could avenge Shui Mo, even if Yi Zichen was a demon.